From what I hear, from what I have observed, and from what I've studied over a lot of years now, if you're a woman, you likely look at any random new guy that comes into your life with a healthy dose of skepticism. And with damn good reason. Statistically, the world is a whole lot scarier for your gender than it is for mine. Going on a date? You probably first arrange to meet somewhere in public and then maybe share your location with friends or family or tell your roommate the time you're supposed to be back and the name of the guy you're meeting. If some dude just approaches you on the street with an offer, something that sounds too good to be true, like a modeling contract or some free shit, I'm guessing you're way more likely to tell them that you have to get going, even if you don't have to get going, than to actually go with them. Even when it's not your life, you might do some digging, like say if a close friend starts dating a new person, maybe do a little bit of social media stalking, figure out if this person's actually who they say they are, if they're not married or lying about what they do for work or something else. 9 times out of 10, it's just due diligence. You know that whoever the guy is, they're probably not actively dangerous. But what if you were in a situation where you couldn't afford not to trust someone? What if some random man promised you a job that could potentially keep your family from literally starving, that could allow your children to finally go to a real school? Would you maybe be a little less discriminating then? Would your desperate times lead you into some desperate measures? For somewhere between nearly 40 and up to around 70 women living in South Africa in the mid-1990s, they said yes to this offer and they paid for their wager with their lives. During that decade, South Africa's overall unemployment rate hovered around 20%, with inflation peaking in 1991 at 15%, and for Black South Africans, and all of these women were Black, the unemployment was between 26% to 43%. And a 1995 report found that in 1993, depending on the chosen poverty line, the proportion of people in poverty in South Africa ranged from 28.8% to 56.7%. Despite the fact that the discriminatory age of apartheid, in which South African citizens who were not white were unable to vote, intermarry, were often forcibly relocated under threat of violence, despite that ending in 1990, with the country formally democratizing by 1994, things were still far from good for the average Black South African. The new government, headed by the legendary Nelson Mandela, was faced with a large pool of unskilled and unemployed labor, acute and widespread poverty, and poor access to education, health, other basic public amenities for the majority of the population. And there was the fact that the nation's police force was still largely built out of men hired during apartheid, officers who had grown used to brutalizing their nation's population instead of helping it. While many, like Mandela, were working towards a new South Africa, a better, modern, just South Africa, other people were exploiting the chaos of the 1990s for their own dark ends. And one of those people was Moses Sithole. Born in 1964 during what was arguably the most violent decade of apartheid, Moses was given up by his abusive mother after his father's death and placed in an orphanage with his other siblings. After being bounced around for a number of years, moving from home to home, he would eventually run away and make his way in the world. And he would carry a strong hatred of women with him wherever he went. He began committing a series of brutal rapes, one of which landed him in prison. And once he got back out, Moses would vow that his victims would never be able to report him again. They'd never get the chance, because they'd all be dead. The very bloody story of a very bad man, called South Africa's Ted Bundy, right here, right now, on another true crime and South African edition of Timesuck.
This is Michael McDonald, and you're listening to Timesuck.
You're listening to Timesuck.
Well, happy Monday and welcome back to the Cult of the Curious. I'm Dan Cummins, the master sucker, baby thumb guard opponent, isolationism and nationalism critic, empathy fan, and you are listening to Timesuck. Hail Nimrod, hail Lucifina, praise be to good boy Bojangles, and glory be to Triple M. The Bad Magic Street Team 2025 is here, Monday, September 8th, which is the day this episode comes out on the regular feed at 12 noon Pacific time. The stickers will have gone live on our website, badmagicproductions.com. Once again, we're giving away a $200 merch credit just for slapping some stickers around your neck of the woods or wherever you may be traveling. The stickers are free, but there will only be 500 sticker packs available. They are first come, first serve, so check and see if you can still grab some. And once you receive them, all you have to do is slap them all over the fucking place. Snap a pic of where you put them, and then post that pic on Instagram or Facebook using the hashtag #BadMagicStreetTeam, and that's it. The winner will be announced November 3rd on socials and on the shows. Well, hopefully on the shows, but we record ahead of time. So our personal announcement may be delayed. Probably will be delayed. But November 3rd on socials, that's how you can find out if you have won this prize. And again, on the episodes might be delayed, so keep an eye on the socials. Legal disclaimer, Bad Magic will not be held liable for any misplaced or illegally placed stickers. Please use discretion and be smart, but also get fucking weird. Thanks, everybody. So excited as I record this also to see a bunch of you at our Wet Hot Bad Magic Summer Camp. I hope by the time you've heard this on the regular feed, I've had a blast. I hope by the time some of you space lizards are hearing this the Thursday before the Monday this comes out, that we're having a great fucking time. And now, for a topic that brings us back into the realm of true crime through a location that we have not visited very often here in the Suckverse. We have visited South Africa a couple times. We did in our episode on Shaka Zulu, the king of the Zulu kingdom from 816 until his death in 1828. Did I say 816? 1816. He didn't live 1,000 years. He was a fucking tough guy, but he wasn't 1,000 years tough. Remember him? Spurned as an illegitimate son before he grew up to become a fierce Zulu warrior, refining the military system of the Zulus to make them a powerful fighting force. We also covered, more recently, Nelson Mandela, a South African anti-apartheid revolutionary, politician, and philanthropist who served as the country's first black president between 1994 and 1999, when the murders of this episode take place. He spent 27 years in prison for his activism against apartheid, a system of racial segregation and discrimination. After his release, he negotiated an end to apartheid, won the 1993 Nobel Peace Prize, and helped turn his homeland into a multiracial democracy. Shaka Zulu, Nelson Mandela, a couple cool guys. The subject of our story today, not so fucking cool. But here we are. Before we dig into today's true crime element, first let's familiarize or refamiliarize ourselves with the setting of today's story, South Africa. Home to just over 64 million people, according to the most recent 2024 numbers, South Africa, officially the Republic of South Africa, is the southernmost country in Africa, of course. I wish it was northernmost, because that would just be very, very funny for me. I would love any country to do something like that, just to be weird. Come on, South Korea. Change your name to West Korea, just to fuck with people. or to the real North Korea. Or even better, Norther Korea. What's the worst that could happen? North Korea nukes you? That probably could happen, so maybe don't do that. Anyway, South Africa, bounded to the south by almost 2,000 miles of coastline that stretch along the South Atlantic and Indian Oceans. To the north, it is bordered by the neighboring countries of Botswana, Namibia, Zimbabwe. To the east and northeast by Mozambique and Eswatini, formerly known as Swaziland. Also completely surrounds the tiny nation of Lesotho. While Pretoria is generally considered to be South Africa's capital city, at least I've often heard it referred to as the capital, it actually has three capitals. Pretoria is the administrative capital, Cape Town, the seat of parliament, its legislative capital, and while for years, Bloemfontein was universally regarded as the judicial capital, Johannesburg, aka Joburg, the nation's largest city, has been the site of the highest court akin to our Supreme Court since 1995. Bloemfontein, though, still has a number of courts and mostly is referred to as South Africa's judicial capital. If you've heard of South Africa, it might be in the context of apartheid, if not rugby. Known for both, rugby now, apartheid before. The system that took over in 1948 when the National Party was elected to power following decolonization from Great Britain. Taking Canada's Indian Act as a framework, South Africa's white government classified all of the nation's people into four groups: whites, blacks, Indians, and colored people, aka people of mixed race. And it developed rights and limitations for each. The nation's white minority, less than 20% of the population, controlled the vastly larger black majority. That white minority has shrunk down since to only 7% of the population. And while whites under apartheid enjoyed the highest standard of living in all of Africa, comparable to Western nations, the black majority remained disadvantaged by almost every standard, including income, education, housing, life expectancy, all the way up to the end of apartheid on May 4th, 1990. And this would have been impossible without arguably the most famous South African, Nelson Mandela, who fought apartheid via speeches and letters during his 27-year-long imprisonment by the South African government. He would eventually win the Nobel Peace Prize and be elected president of South Africa. Today's story is, of course, nowhere near as inspiring as the story of Nelson Mandela, but it's a good excuse to cover some South African history again. Not as much depth as I covered it back in the Nelson Mandela episode, but enough to get a good feel for the land that today's victims and their killer were living in. So let's go back to the beginning. Human beings have lived at the southern tip of Africa for more than 100,000 years, and our direct ancestors have been living there for some 3.3 million years. Around 2,000 years ago, South Africa's inhabitants were mainly formed into two groups. The Khoikhoi, called the Hottentots by Europeans, farmers who had settled mostly along the coast, while the San, aka the Bushmen, hunter-gatherers spread across the region. As the centuries passed, more groups, especially Bantu-speaking groups from Central Africa, began to make their way south, and then the Europeans would arrive, and everything would be amazing for everyone forever! Just like history is taught on Prager University. No. If I ever use anything from the radical right-wing propaganda machine that is PragerU, just fucking shoot me in the face. No, things were fucking terrible for the locals once my ancestors showed up. The first European settlement in southern Africa was established by the Dutch East India Company in Table Bay, modern-day Cape Town, in 1652. Created mainly to supply passing ships headed back and forth between Europe and India and Asia with fresh water, meat, and produce. The colony grew rapidly as Dutch farmers settled to grow crops, though the vast majority of these crops were grown not by the Dutch themselves, but of course by slaves imported from Eastern Africa, Madagascar, and the East Indies. And they weren't loving it. They didn't like being slaves. That's a weird thing that's being taught now to some people. Oh, no, it's better than the alternative. No, it wasn't. And this would, of course, bring conflict. Beginning in the 1770s, colonists came into contact and inevitable conflict with Bantu-speaking chiefdoms, some 500 or so miles east of Cape Town. A century of intermittent warfare ensued, during which the colonists leveraged chiefdoms against each other to become the dominant group in the area. And then the British showed up, and shit got worse. On brand. In 1795, the British occupied the Cape as a strategic base against the French during the Napoleonic Wars, controlling the sea route to the east. They would be rivaled briefly in the 1820s by the celebrated Zulu leader and former Suck subject Shaka Zulu, who established sway over a vast area of Southeast Africa. Backing up a bit, Britain seized the Cape of Good Hope from the Dutch permanently in 1805. Many of the Dutch settlers rejected British rule, began trekking eastward, displacing native peoples and clashing with the Zulu kingdom. They established several Boer states, including the Orange Free State and South African Republic. The British, meanwhile, took up arms against the Xhosa, the Zulu, the Basotho peoples, and to combat the rising influence of various African groups, they sent their own colonists, not military men, but settlers who would lay claim to the area for Britain and continue to occupy it in perpetuity. The first large group of British colonists, or settlers, known as the 1820 settlers, arrived in what is now Nelson Mandela Bay, on 21 ships. They outnumbered. What did I throw out of there? Just fucking completely threw that word from my brain to my notes. They numbered about 4,500 people and included artisans, tradesmen, religious leaders, merchants, teachers, bookbinders, blacksmiths, fucking unemployed dudes, discharged sailors, fuckheads, soldiers, farmers, all kinds of people. When Shaka Zulu died in 1828, a power vacuum opened that nobody successfully filled, and the various Zulu splinter groups failed to maintain the influence that Shaka had during his life. And that gave Britain the ability to fully move into the interior, pushing northwards further and further into Zulu lands, while the Boer, sometimes now called the Afrikaner, these states looked on warily, fearing a British invasion. And then diamonds and gold changed everything. Diamonds, lots and lots of fucking diamonds, were discovered in South Africa in 1867, near Kimberley, in what is known today as the Northern Cape. And then gold, sweet gold, was uncovered in the Witwatersrand. All these words. Oh, fuck you Dutch people. Witwatersrand goldfields in 1886. The demand for franchise rights for English-speaking immigrants working on the new goldfields was the pretext Britain used to go to war with the Dutch-inhabited nations of Transvaal and the Orange Free State in 1899. The Anglo-Boer/South African War was the bloodiest, longest, most expensive war Britain engaged in between 1815 and 1915. cost more than 200 million pounds. Britain lost more than 22,000 men. The Boers, aka the Dutch, aka the Afrikaners, lost over 34,000 men. More than 15,000 black South Africans were caught in the crossfire and perished, many in concentration camps, and ultimately the British won, as they often did. Britain consolidated South Africa in 1910, gave it considerable autonomy as a dominion of the empire, but the Afrikaners remained resentful. Meanwhile, black South Africans were also resentful about the British all-white government and founded the African National Congress to protest the exclusion of black people from power in their own fucking land. Unfortunately, neither the Dutch nor the Africans would ever focus their energies collectively against their common enemy of the British. Instead, they would turn upon each other. In 1948, amid widespread grievances over continued British dominion of the economy, the presence of black South Africans in South African cities, the National Party, who were Afrikaners who believed in an Afrikaner-only ethno-state, well, they became the majority party. To be clear, white and specifically Afrikaner or Dutch oppression of black South Africans had long predated the formal establishment of apartheid in 1948, but now it would get all fucking organized and shit. Apartheid legalized, enforced a specific racial ideology that separated South Africans into legally distinct racial groups, all with different privileges and abilities, and a lot of lack of privileges. The first apartheid laws were the Prohibition of Mixed Marriages Act in 1949, followed by the Immorality Act of 1950, which worked together to prohibit most South Africans from marrying or having sexual relationships with persons of a different race. That's so fucked. Obviously to have it be the law, but also to call it the Immorality Act. It's immoral for a white to have sex with a black, which is such a fucked up way of just saying they're so disgustingly inferior. Shit like that is what should remind us all that life is political. We should never ignore politics. It is important to fight and vote and protest to not end up with more dumb fuck laws passed by dumb fuck people who passed the laws that created apartheid. If you're lucky enough to live in a democratic nation, so important to vote for what you believe in. It really is. I did not believe that when I was younger. I became so apathetic. I sure believe it now. Did you know that only 65.3% of those legally able to vote in the U.S. 2024 presidential election actually voted? Only 77 million people voted for Trump out of 236 million eligible people, which means 159 million people voted for somebody else or didn't vote. And in the 2020 election, Biden only received 81 million votes out of the estimated 231.6 million people. That was the most votes ever for a president, but still, 150.6 million people either voted for somebody else or didn't vote. These elections are almost always decided by a few million votes, as so many elections are, by a few million or less. And look at how much our nation has changed from one presidency to another. Do you hate how things are going? Well, fucking vote. Do you want things to change? Fucking vote. Do you not want things to change? Fucking vote. Your vote matters, right? Those who say it doesn't are generally, in my opinion, just looking to normalize their own nihilism and apathy, and they're wrong. Back to the shitty laws of apartheid-era South Africa now. The first grand apartheid law, the Population Registration Act of 1950, classified all South Africans into one of four racial groups: black, white, colored, and Indian. Every citizen over age 18 was required to carry an identity card showing their racial group. If a person's exact race was unclear, it was assigned by a government board, and not scientifically at all. In many cases, members of the same family would be assigned different races when their exact race was unclear, just based on how they look, based on the opinions of unqualified, racist, random, bureaucrat dipshits. Just, hey, look, black, so black. He probably look more Indian to me. So, hey, Indian, I don't even know what's going on here. So, color, I guess. Oh, gosh damn, I'm smart. Good thing I'm in charge. These small, weak, scared, dumb motherfuckers came up with a bunch of bizarre ways to figure out somebody's race. For example, the so-called comb test. If a comb became stuck while being pulled through a person's hair, well, they were automatically classified as a black African and subject to apartheid's social and political restrictions for this racial category, which were the most severe. Apartheid was then further implemented through the Group Areas Act of 1950, which required people to live in specifically assigned geographic areas according to their race. Imagine how that fucked up life for families whose members were just haphazardly classified in a variety of groups. To help enforce apartheid segregation of the races and prevent blacks from encroaching on white areas, The government strengthened existing pass laws, so-called pass laws, which required non-whites to carry documents authorizing their presence in restricted areas. Whites got to go everywhere. They didn't need one. To further enforce the physical separation of the races, the Bantu Authorities Act of 1951 established tribal organizations for black Africans, and the promotion of Bantu Self-Government Act of 1959. Oh, it sounds so nice, but it wasn't. It created 10 African homelands called Bantustans. The Bantu Homeland Citizenship Act of 1970 made every black South African, irrespective of their actual residence, a citizen of one of these Bantustans, which were organized on the basis of ethnic and linguistic groupings. And as citizens of these Bantustans, they were stripped of their South African citizenship, thereby barred from any South African political activity, even though South African politics still ruled them, decided their fates, and they lived inside South Africa. It's fucking crazy. And that was passed in 1970. God damn it. The South African government manipulated the politics of the Bantustans so that compliant chiefs controlled the administrations of most of these territories, and they never had any chance to get out, as they were required to go to black schools under the 1953 Bantu Education Act, which established mandatory state-run schools where students were trained for manual labor and menial jobs that the South African government deemed suitable for people of their race. Again, so insulting. From 1961 to 1994, more than 3.5 million people were forcibly removed from their homes, deposited in these Bantustans, where they were plunged into poverty and hopelessness with no educational or professional opportunities to ever lift themselves up and out of there. And at this point, you might be asking, where was the U.S. during all of this? Right? Just a few years before the beginning of apartheid, the U.S. had helped fight the Nazis who had forced Jews to live in separate areas, just like apartheid, deprived them of educational and professional opportunities, just like apartheid, made them identify themselves with armbands and passes, very similar to apartheid, remarkably similar. However, I think people forget that the U.S. for sure 100% did not enter World War II to help the Jewish people. We entered World War II because Japan attacked us hard stop. Prior to the attack on Pearl Harbor in December of 1941, the U.S. stance on World War II was official neutrality, driven by a strong isolationist sentiment, though the government under President Franklin D. Roosevelt actively supported the Allied powers with economic aid. A lot of brave Americans certainly ended up doing a lot of very brave things in World War II. So many noble sacrifices were made. But the notion that we rushed into Europe, primarily driven by nobility to save people, is bullshit. That's what we ended up doing, but had Japan not attacked, who the fuck knows how far the U.S. would have let things go. And because no one was attacking the U.S. in regards to South African apartheid, we didn't do shit to help black South Africans. Luckily, some black South Africans were helping themselves. From the inception of the independent white rule in 1910, various black South Africans protested against racial segregation with boycotts, riots, other means of organized resistance. I mentioned the African National Congress, which spearheaded the anti-apartheid movement, but after just a couple of years, in 1960, the white government succeeded in banning the ANC, along with all legal and non-violent forms of protest by non-white South Africans. Many leaders of the ANC and PAC were imprisoned, including ANC leader Nelson Mandela. And of course, the government was unafraid to use outright violence to squash such resistance. In March of 1960, police killed an estimated 69 people in the town of Sharpeville after they had protested apartheid. There were 249 victims in total after the first day, including 29 children, with 69 people killed, 180 people injured. Some were shot in the back as they fled. Fucking crazy. Then in June of 1964, Nelson Mandela was sentenced to life in prison for organizing an illegal strike, leaving the country without valid travel documents. On the trip in question, he had traveled to Addis Ababa to attend the Pan-African Freedom Movement of East and Central Africa Conference in February of 1962 to rally support for an underground wing of the African National Congress. Mandela had been sentenced to 5 years in prison, November 7th, 1962, 3 for incitement, 2 for passport violation. But the South African government later charged him with high treason. Mandela, along with 7 other defendants, sentenced to life imprisonment, June 12, 1964. Popular demoralization now set in. The will of the South African people, nearly broken. It would be a decade before mass resistance was revived within South Africa. With the imprisonment of Mandela seen as black South Africa's greatest hope, it seemed like apartheid was here to stay, and there was nothing that black South Africans could do but accept it. Black South Africans were generally impoverished. They were abused by their own government. They had little hope for things to be better in the future, and that would be the situation Moses Sithole will be born into in November of 1964. Sithole would grow up, like many of his peers, with a father traveling to find work, a mother who had few resources to support him or herself, eventually handing him over to an orphanage outside of Johannesburg. Undoubtedly, these experiences, this tough, hard, scrabble, discriminatory life, led to Moses' familiarity with violence, and then perhaps led him to justify his own violent tendencies, as some sort of, well, that's just how life is kind of bullshit. Apartheid ended formally May 4th, 1990, after nearly a decade of work by a resistance movement called the United Democratic Front. The UDF, formed in 1983, was a collaboration of church leaders and political leaders, community leaders, trade unionists, and more. Archbishop Desmond Tutu, Reverend Alan Boesak, two of the UDF's main leaders, started to organize marches to Parliament in Cape Town and Pretoria, Johannesburg. They drew crowds of up to 80,000 people. And around the world, this activism drew attention. And eventually, two of the most hardline anti-communists in the world, Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher, who had both been in favor of keeping apartheid government in place, they saw it as a bulwark against communism, largely because the Soviets backed the ANC when the US and the UK would not. Well, they were now in the minority. Indeed, both Reagan and Thatcher had condemned Mandela and the African National Congress as communists and terrorists, and history has not viewed that well. Reagan, no stranger to being on the wrong side of history. His bullshit trickle-down theory of economics basically paved the way for the U.S. economy to be handed to the billionaire corporate oligarchs who currently prevent the average citizen from being able to afford shit like basic health care. He had vetoed the Comprehensive Anti-Apartheid Act of 1986. But the U.S. Congress overrode that terrible decision with a 2/3 majority, passing the act to impose sanctions on South Africa. Among other provisions, the Anti-Apartheid Act outlawed the importation of many South African products like steel, iron, uranium, coal, textiles, agricultural commodities into the U.S. It prohibited the South African government from holding U.S. bank accounts, banned South African Airways from landing at U.S. airports, blocked any form of U.S. foreign aid or assistance to the then pro-apartheid South African government, and banned all new U.S. investment and loans in South Africa. The UK would also end up imposing limited sanctions despite Thatcher's weak-ass objections. Mandela finally walked free February 11th, 1990, after spending 27 years in prison, and negotiations to end apartheid formally began that year. These negotiations lasted for 4 years, ending with the election of Mandela as president. Now South Africans of all races were allowed to vote, freedom of the press was restored, and hundreds of political prisoners were freed. And things were getting better. Right? Right? Actually, somewhat paradoxically, it was the end of apartheid that all hell would break loose. Not just for Moses, but for multiple South African serial killers. The increase in serial homicide coincides with the end of apartheid, wrote Robert Ressler, the former FBI agent, vaunted serial killer hunter we have referenced in so many true crime episodes. Ressler found that the abolishment of apartheid simultaneously lifted the tight controls of a police state and unleashed a generation of South Africans whose childhood years had been deformed by the brutal excesses of state-sponsored racism and violence in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. There were 11,750 murders in South Africa in 1989. That number would soar to an astonishing 25,782 in 1995. Rape and robbery similarly escalated as a generation weaned on violence and oppression came of age far more free, but still impoverished, still never given the tools to properly lift themselves up by their so-called bootstraps. Ironically, the law enforcement apparatus that specialized in the terrorist tactics necessary to maintain a police state would prove itself to be ill-trained and ill-equipped to perform the basics of fighting crime. In our story today, we will meet not one but two black South African serial killers, but there were far more in the 90s and early 2000s, like suspected serial killer Norman Afzaal Simons, a.k.a. the Station Strangler, who allegedly took over a dozen pre-adolescent boys to remote places where he then sodomized and murdered them between 1996 and 1994. Interestingly, 11 of the murders happened in a 2-month spree in 1994, right at the end of apartheid. And it wouldn't only be black South Africans doing the killing. In 1998, police finally caught Nolan Edwards, a white prize fighter whose Afrikaner white supremacy manifested in the rape and murder of multiple black sex workers. Edwards clung to that Afrikaner white supremacy because he felt it was all he had. He was from a blue-collar mining community where alcoholism, suicide, and violence were rife. As a child, he'd been molested by a family friend, sexually assaulted by a friend's mother. Though his neighborhood was racially distinct from those of black serial killers, he had much in common with them and chose to cling to violence in a world that seemed chaotic, brutal, and beyond saving. This is not to excuse anyone's behavior, however. Moses Sithole was a grade-A piece of shit. An unrepentant deviant who may have murdered regardless, he might have murdered regardless of, where and when he was born. Indeed, his crimes show a methodology that gradually evolved over time from rapes that got more and more brutal to murders that became more and more audacious, calculated, and sadistic. He actively preyed on the weakness of South African society, like the lack of employment opportunities, to lure women into his clutches by promising them jobs, using a charismatic facade to make women think they were talking to some wealthy big shot. He preyed on other victims of South Africa's centuries-long racial subjugation, people like himself. And now that the stage has been set, let's properly meet our sadistic subject in today's Timesuck timeline.
Strap on those boots, soldier. We're marching down a Timesuck timeline.
Moses Sithole was born November 17th, 1964. His formative years, less than ideal. His father, Simon Tangawire Sithole, his mother, Sophie, and his 5 siblings lived in Vosloorus, a historically black area just south of Germiston and Boksburg, about 18 miles southeast of Johannesburg and part of the city's metro area. At least now it is part of the city's metro area. Also, historically black is a nice way of saying that it was established in 1963 when black Africans were forcibly removed from Sturtonville, forced to live in Vosloorus because Sturtonville was considered by the government to be too close to a white town. Apartheid reigned. Black South Africans had to live in segregated areas of town. As I mentioned, many black workers had to live in special housing built by the owners of the factories where they were employed. Any resistance to government or, corporate oppression was met with violence or imprisonment. Black South Africans were very nearly essentially slaves. Moses was said to be a bright and curious boy, but he had few opportunities for education. He lived, like most black South Africans at the time, in a tin-roofed, crudely constructed shanty. He would claim that his mother was a physically abusive alcoholic, that an older stepsister abused him, and that at a young age, a neighbor woman raped him. Not sure if that's true, but that's what he claimed. While Moses was 6, his father died. That happened for sure. Unable to manage 6 children alone without a job, his mother Sophie decided to leave her children at a police station. She made them understand in no uncertain terms they were not to tell the police officers that she was their mother. Consequently, the children were placed into an orphanage in Benoni. Sithole will spend the rest of his childhood bouncing from one poorly run youth home or orphanage to another in the Joburg surrounding area. Sithole will later say during a prison interview, the treatment was bad, really bad. You had to be strong to survive. I don't doubt that. Once when he was 8, Sithole ran away, tried to return to his mother. He crossed numerous shanty towns, miles of undeveloped land to find her. He did find her, but there would be no joyous reunion. Instead, his mother brought him back to the orphanage. And that level of rejection, that had to have stung so very badly. And I'm sure helped lead Moses towards his hatred of not just his mother, but of all women. Sithole said when talking about this, hurt has been my daily bread. Hurt has been my prayer. Every minute, every second, every day, every month, every year. When Sithole was 11, he was sent to an orphanage in KwaZulu-Natal, an eastern province of South Africa, an apartheid-designated black homeland near the Indian Ocean. In his early teens, Moses ran away again, hitchhiked 300 miles back to Vosloorus to stay with his older brother Patrick. He took odd menial jobs working on farms, working in numerous gold mines surrounding Johannesburg, trained as an amateur boxer for a little bit. Also in a move that is not explained super well in sources, seems to have sold the house that his brother Patrick was living in without Patrick's permission, which severed that relationship once and for all. And now he would be out on his own, kind of. He was also dating somebody, multiple somebodies, good-looking dude. He grew a reputation in his teens for being a ladies' man, known for his charm and disarming smile. His later defense attorney, Eben Jordan, will say he is a very intelligent man, well-spoken. He was a member of the library in Pretoria. He checked out CDs of classical music. He seemed very cultured, sophisticated. He seemed like a real catch, dating-wise. But beneath his charming demeanor, this Ted Bundy of South Africa was harboring an extremely warped view of women. Big-time mommy issues. Very quick to anger, the slightest rejection from women would set off a violent rage in him. The first time he acted on his growing violent impulses towards women, that we know of anyway, was in 1987 when he attacked his girlfriend's older sister, 38-year-old Patricia Khumalo. On September 14th of that year, Patricia's sister introduced her to a man she was dating that she knew was Martin, but was really Moses. Moses was 22 years old at this time. Seemed like a nice guy. He's well-dressed, put together, most important of all. Said he had a bunch of connections to various industries. In fact, he said he had a job for Patricia. If she wanted it, good job. And in South Africa at this time, damn near everybody needed a job. As I mentioned earlier, unemployment rates fucking soaring. Unemployment rates for black citizens in the 80s in South Africa ranged from 19% to 40%. Poverty fucking rampant. Estimates suggest approximately 60% of black South Africans live below the MLL, the minimum living level. In the 1980s, the MLL, a term used to describe the minimum financial resources needed for a household to maintain an acceptable above poverty line living standard, encompassing basic health and rational expenditures. And an estimated 62% of African households in the Joburg area specifically had incomes below the household subsistence level, the HSL, and the HSL was a poverty measure primarily used in South Africa that calculated the minimum cost of basic necessities for a household, food, clothing, fuel, transport, to ensure survival. So forget thriving. Most black South Africans truly barely surviving. So the promise of a good job, that was fucking huge. Right? Very, very appealing. He knew exactly what he was doing here. Excited by this opportunity, Patricia got on a train with him in Boksburg. They got off in the tiny Cleveland suburb of Joburg. We'll visit this little tiny suburb a lot. Very poor, almost exclusively black, largely industrial. Only a little over 2,000 people live here today, mostly as factories, warehouses, remnants of old mines like it was back then. And here Martin said he knew a shortcut through a dense forested area to get to where the supposed job was, and then, of course, along this walk, something changes. As they walked through an old mine dump area, Martin grabbed Patricia by her shirt and ordered her to lie down on the ground. He proceeded to rape her several times as she pleaded with him to not kill her. And then he did something very strange. He told her he would not kill her because she had the kind of eyes that made him feel sorry. Well, that's good. I mean, sure, he raped her a bunch of times, but in the end, he did feel kind of sorry about the whole thing based on her eyes. So, kind of a sweetie. No, after he was done, he tied her hands up with her bra, pulled her dress up over her head, and told her to wait for him to leave. She would feel she was lucky to escape with her life. When he disappeared, stayed away from both her and her sister, she never, ever expected to see this Martin character again. Sithole likely was not killing yet, but he was already establishing a pattern to his sexually violent crimes that would become more and more familiar to investigators and victims over the next 8 years when he is not in prison. Just a year later, Sithole would pull that same shit again. A woman named Thembi Ngwenya met a young man who introduced himself as Samson, a man who looked a lot like, as in exactly like, Moses Sithole, in September of 1988 at a clothing store where she was working. Immediately, he offered her a better paying job. But she thought for a second, decided, maybe I should speak to my boss first. And that hesitation, that decision would lead to her avoiding being attacked. However, she also would unwittingly set up a friend to be attacked in her place. Thembi remembered a friend, Dorcas Kubani, who was unemployed. Thembi, trying to be a good friend, thinking she didn't need a job as badly as Dorcas did, well, he referred her to Samson. And on September 28th, Moses asked 26-year-old Dorcas to accompany him to Cleveland, that small industrial eastern suburb of Joburg. They got off at the Geldenhuis train station, walked through the forest before Moses abruptly slapped her and flashed a long knife. He told her that he would kill her and cut her to fucking pieces unless she did exactly what he told her to do. With alarming efficiency, it was like he'd already been doing this a lot. He pushed Dorcas to the ground, ripped her underwear off, and raped her. And then, very bizarrely, when he was done, he started talking to her as if they were old friends who had just grabbed a pleasant cup of coffee together, or a cup of coffee. Even asked her for a favor. He told her he had a girlfriend in Vosloris named Sibogile, and that he wanted Dorcas to go look for her because Sibogile had stolen some things from him. But for some reason, he wouldn't say what those things were. What the fuck? Some people are just so goddamn insane. Imagine attacking somebody, sexual or otherwise. You rape somebody, you beat the shit out of them, whatever. And then when you're done, you're like, hey, what are you doing later? I was kind of hoping to catch a movie tonight. You want to come? Oh, also, hey, would you mind swinging by my friend Sibo's house? I need her to give me back my Neil Diamond CDs. She's not returning my calls. And I'm starving. You really put up a fight. You wore me out. You want to grab a little hamburger somewhere? Milkshakes? Split some french fries? Fucking lunatic. After crazy ass Sithole talked to her about Sibogile, he then asked if they could have sex again. Oh, yeah. He just raped her. And then he's like, hey, can we have sex again? And she was like, no. And then he raped her again. During this attack, someone began to approach their location, and Moses, a.k.a. Samson, ran off. Like Patricia, Dorcas, glad to have escaped with her life. Interestingly, Moses really did have a girlfriend named Sibogile at this time. Excuse me, I wonder if he really was hoping that she'd go talk to her. It's fucking absurd. At 17 years old, Sibogile Nikosi did not know much better than to trust the handsome 23-year-old man who seemed to her like a great guy who adored her. And he did adore her at first, but then he started to beat her. He started to threaten the lives of her family if she were to ever leave him. Right, classic domestic abuser behavior. She said that he could turn at the drop of a hat, beat her, and then when somebody came over, abruptly just be all sunny smiles and warm hospitality. It's like he was two different people. And for at least a second time now, Moses will rape a girlfriend's sister. Lindiwe Nikose was 15 when her sister, Sibogile, was dating Moses. And one day in October of 1988, Moses asked her if she wanted to visit her sister in Soweto, a township in Greater Johannesburg, another suburb, impoverished, predominantly black, that became known to the world outside of Joburg, when on June 16, 1976, what came to be known as the Soweto Uprising occurred. Mass protests erupted over the government's policy to enforce education in Afrikaans rather than in students' native languages. Police opened fire on approximately 10,000 protesting students. 23 died. Over the course of 3 days, at least 176 protesters, mostly students, were killed. Some estimates say up to 600 were killed, and over 1,000 were injured. South African human rights activist, former president, previous Suck subject, Nelson Mandela, lived in Soweto for years. And anyways, pretending to lure Lindiwe to Soweto, Moses took her instead to his favorite new rape spot instead. Or took her instead there. They took the train, got off at Geldenhuis station. While crossing Moses' shortcut, Moses asked her if she wanted to have sex with him. She refused. Of course she did. He's dating her sister. He's 23. She's 15. They're not dating. Moses, of course, now flies into a rage at this rejection, takes out a canister of gasoline he had hidden in the area, or just grabbed somebody else's gas that was fucking canister laying around, tells Lindiwe he's going to kill her, going to burn her body if she does not have sex with him. Imagine how terrified she is. She has only known him as her older sister's easygoing boyfriend before this moment. He proceeds to grab her, beat her, rape her, strangles her until she loses consciousness. And when she wakes back up, he's sitting next to her, and he tells her that he will kill both her and her niece if she says anything about this to anyone. And then takes her home, acts like nothing ever happened. And she was too scared to tell anybody at the time. Just a few months later, he attacked somebody else. A young woman named Baiswa Swakamisa. She meets a man who introduces himself as Lloyd Thomas in February of 1989. In what was rapidly becoming his MO, he offers her a job, tells her that she needs to go with him to his office to sort some shit out regarding this job, and then while they walk through a forested area near Cleveland, keeps taking these ladies to the same place. Baiswa thought she saw something flash silver. When she looked closer, she saw that he had taken out a panga, this kind of machete used to cut sugarcane. I watched some videos. They're a fucking very efficient little sword. They cut the shit out of just about anything. He pulls one of those out from a rolled up newspaper under his arm. Then he didn't bother asking her if she wanted sex. He just straight up told her they were going to have sex. He threw the panga down to one side. He said that she could turn him down and run away, but that would be risky because if he caught her, he would kill her. So she stood there now, stunned into silence, could not believe what was happening. He approached her, slapped her in the face, ordered her to take off her clothes. She's still stunned. She's frozen. Baiswa wills herself to try and do something, but she can't do anything. He slaps her twice more with an open hand. Now she starts to take her clothes off. But then as he tried to assault her, she discovered he is not hard, he's impotent. She later said she had to, quote, kiss his neck and stick her fingers into his ears just so he could get an erection to rape her with. She was afraid if he continued to struggle, he would kill her. Man, what a mind fuck she's been put in. Afterwards, there was no pleasant small talk this time. Instead, he told her that he hated all women because he once had a child with a girlfriend in Alexandra, another township in Johannesburg, and that his girlfriend had poisoned this child. I fucking highly doubt that ever happened. There's zero documentation that went down. That just sounds crazy. After telling her that, he tied her up, took her money, left her there, of course, threatening her, making it clear that he would kill her if she told anybody what had happened. But unlike previous victims, Baiswa decides she is going to do something about this. She goes to the police. She makes a report. Even though she thinks that this Lloyd Thomas motherfucker is probably long gone and she'll never see him again. But then a couple months later, she does see him again, standing outside the office where she worked. She informs the police. Lloyd is arrested, but now he gives his name to the police as Moses Sithole. Fucking insanely, Baiswa now has to ride to the police station in the back of the same cruiser as her rapist. That's fucking insane. He cursed at her during the ride. Of course he did. said he should have killed her, which will not bode well for him in court. But before moving forward, my God, that is so callous and disrespectful. To have a woman and the man she is accused of raping her hop into the back of the same police car. What a bunch of cunts. They had to have known how fucked up that was, but just didn't care. That just speaks to how little they thought of black women. Fortunately, Moses would ultimately be found guilty of rape, sentenced to 6 years in prison. He would serve 4 of those years. And while serving, he said some seriously contradictory shit. He would tell other inmates and authorities that he had never raped anybody. But also, he would talk about how he, quote, should have killed that bitch, referring to the woman he was convicted of raping. He also allegedly was brutalized, raped himself by a number of other inmates in prison who had no respect for a rapist. And while I don't feel bad for him getting attacked in that way because of what he did, I do hate that it caused his rage to grow further and that he will then take that rage out on a lot more women going forward. During 1993, shortly before he was released, Sithole meets a woman visiting one of her brothers in this same prison. Her name is Martha. They begin to write to one another. Apparently, he is able to charm her because when he is released later the same year, he moves in with her in Soshanguve, this predominantly black city, over 99% of its residents native to Africa, of almost 1 million people, actually, just north of South Africa's capital city of Pretoria. Later, when Martha gets pregnant, she moves in with her parents in Atteridgeville, a much smaller township. It's a western suburb of Pretoria, and Sithole follows some months later. Her family does not care for him, but they nevertheless give him a job. He works as a mechanic fixing cars alongside the woman he now referred to as his wife, even though they are not legally married, alongside his wife's brother, and they both work, him and her brother, for her father. Atteridgeville is also where a ruthless serial killer known as the Panga Man lived, where he hacked 16 women to pieces with a machete in the 1950s. My God. Now let's talk a second about a young woman named Amanda Titi. She may have been the first woman Moses killed, at least the first we know of. Amanda Titi disappeared August 2nd, 1994. Found 4 days later, back in that tiny little Joburg suburb of Cleveland, found murdered. Moses Sithole had come to her funeral. Her family recognized him. He had visited a few times before she died. They did not know that Moses had used her bank card on the very day she had disappeared. More on her later. Another man will also be accused of killing her. 8 days after Amanda disappeared, August 10th, 1994, a young woman named Joyce Mashabela disappears. Then on August 15th, the unknown man calls her employer, gives his name as Moses Sima, says he found her ID card. Her family members would later go get it from him. That's fucking weird. Pretty messed up. He must have just wanted to, meet some of her family members and just kind of soak up their grief. Just feed on their pain a little bit. 4 days later, Joyce's body is found in a field in Pretoria West. And by that time, Moses, long gone. A lot of people live in transitory lives at this time too, right? Poverty's rampant, unemployment's rampant, and people are just wandering around looking for work all the time. Not unusual for just, people to disappear, which unfortunately helps him greatly here avoid arrest. The following month, September 12th, police revealed that somebody is preying on black women in Cleveland, Moses' favorite stomping ground. 3 bodies have been found in the small industrial area since the beginning of September. The circumstances surrounding each discovery, very similar. First body found September 3rd in some bushes near the Jupiter train station next to Harrietdale, another very small, largely industrial Joburg suburb that butts up against Cleveland from the south. Comically, the current population of Harrietdale, 7 people, almost nothing but like light industrial facilities, a lot of warehouses. September 7th, the second body found next to the M2 freeway on the other side of Harrietdale. Later that same day, the third body found near a mine dump in the same area. None of the women had anything near them to identify them, but their clothes indicated they had been neatly dressed. When they were discovered, they were partially nude, and from all appearances had been raped and strangled. While reports of a possible serial killer began to circulate in the media now, the Brixton Murder and Robbery Unit takes over the case files, links 2 more women who have been discovered in the same area, July 16th and 31st, to these other murders. Then on September 12th, local company gets a strange call. One of this company's employees, Dora Makawenas, had disappeared 3 days prior. The caller claimed that Dora had been in an accident and would not be returning to work. And then he asked her employer that the employer pay her unpaid salary directly into her account. Supposedly, she was in critical condition. She needed the money but couldn't come in. When the employer asked the man who the fuck he was, not a friend, relative, boyfriend, he went silent for a moment and then said his name was Martin. And then after that, he hung up and never called back. Nice try, Moses. September 19th, a 6th body found near a mine dump in Harrietdale. Her top had been pulled over her head, her skirt pushed up over her hips. 2 days later, on September 21st, 2 more bodies are found, both in advanced states of decomposition, bringing the total up to 8. Mickey Pistorius, South Africa's first psychological profiler, visited the crime scene September 28th, 1994. Mickey is an interesting person we should meet here. Originally from Pretoria, Mickey Pistorius graduated from the University of Pretoria with a degree in French before working at a public relations firm, then working at a local newspaper, then became a radio news journalist at the South African Broadcasting Corporation, the SABC, and at the same time wrote for a women's magazine in Cape Town. She also ended up working for a zoo, the Worldwide Fund for Nature, worked at some other places, then found her true passion, which was forensics. Mickey applied for, was accepted into the Psychology Honors and Masters program at the University of Pretoria, acquiring both degrees cum laude. She started lecturing in psychology, earning a reputation for eccentricity. She fucking smoked a lot, never let her photo be taken, spoke bluntly, and none of that matched up with her appearance to many. Right? 5'2", with a heart-shaped face, penchant for wearing stiletto pumps, skirts, blouses, and bows. Mickey did not look like an expert on the world's most depraved killers in most people's minds, but she was. In 1994, she was recruited to the South African police clearance, which caused her to leave her home in Pretoria, which eventually caused enough strain on her marriage to end the 8-year relationship. But for Mickey, that was worth it. A sacrifice she was worth, or it was fine with pain, because now she was the only professional profiler in South Africa and doing what she considered very, very important work, which it was. And now she had an active serial killer to catch. At the first sight, Sergeant Timothy Omgomo Zulu, the investigating officer, told her that the woman found there on July 16th had a number of messages written on her body. The killer had written in black ink on the inside of her right thigh, "She a beach." Did he misspell bitch here? That makes way more sense than beach, like going to the beach. And then he also wrote, "I am not fighting with you, please." The fuck? I feel like we had to have previously covered another serial killer who wrote messages on victims' bodies, but I can't recall it. Maybe carved some fucking words, which is horrific. This is some rare behavior, like something a serial killer in a movie would do. On her left thigh, he had written, "Only you can prevent forest fires." No, that's fucking ridiculous. No, he wrote, "Give a hoot, don't pollute." No, he didn't write that either. He wrote, "I learned it by watching you." For real now, he wrote. He didn't write a bunch of PSAs. He wrote, "We must stay here for as long as you don't understand." Strange shit. Mickey Pistorius began working on the profile of the killer. Apart from their race, youth, and apparent attention to their appearance, the latter suggesting that they were neither a prostitute nor sex worker, nor especially impoverished. Other similarities included that all the women had seemingly been lured into an industrial area, had almost certainly been raped, and had been strangled with a piece of their own clothing, usually a belt, pantyhose, or bra. Some were found completely naked, others semi-nude. Based on all that, Mickey believed the killer was most likely a black man in his mid-20s to early 30s, and she nailed it. But that's, casting a pretty wide net. She also believed the killer was probably charming, well-dressed, self-employed, with access to money and an expensive car. Don't know about the car, but he at least fronted that he was self-employed. He did have money that he stole. He was well-dressed and charming. Based on the women's appearances, it was unlikely that they would go with somebody whose personality, appearance, and accessories did not portray a man of some means, she felt. Mickey felt that he was probably married, which he was, not legally, but for all intent and purpose he was, with an arrogant, secretive personality, which meant he'd be keeping up with reports of murders in the news, which he did. The messages also suggested that the murderer experienced difficulty expressing himself. Fair. He couldn't tell the women his feelings while they were alive, so he would write that on her body after she was dead. Yeah, he only did that, I think, once, though. Could that be due to a speech impediment, Mickey wondered? That didn't really go with the idea that he was charming, though. A suave ladies' man, so she tabled that. Perhaps his difficulty resided on a deeper level, she thought. He struggled to convey his true feelings due to deep emotional trauma, likely from something that happened in his childhood. So overall, she fucking had his number. Several more bodies would appear in the coming months. October 8th, 1994, a body was found near Geldenhuis train station, again, one stop from the Cleveland station. These two stations were connected with the Jupiter station, which is on a separate railway line running more or less parallel to the first until the two eventually converge and Harrietdale falls almost right in the center of this triangle. Searching records of bodies found near the Geldenhuis station yielded 2 more unsolved cases, so it became clear that this killer had a clear space in which he liked to hunt. By November 18th, 1994, detectives had honed in on a suspect, a black man living in a house in Boksburg, east of Johannesburg, about 12 and a half miles from Cleveland. He also owned a college which not surprisingly specialized, very small one, very, very small, is college that specialized in teaching female students called the Vision English Girls College located in Pretoria. In addition, he drove a Mercedes-Benz, which certainly complied with Mickey Pistorius' statement that the killer drove an expensive car. Also found that he had some recent financial troubles, a stressor that, maybe led to him snapping. He was 20,000 Rand or 3,279 US dollars behind in car payments. He owed 50,000 Rand or 8,197 US dollars in rent and electricity bills. His 4 employees at the college, again, I'm thinking this is like fucking tiny strip mall college, they had not received their recent salaries. He had left town 2 weeks before, supposedly on business overseas. And his name was not Moses Sithole. It was David Abraham Salipe. On December 5th, 1994, Moses' girlfriend Martha, the woman he had met while in prison for rape, the woman who is now his wife, has a baby girl whom they named Bridget. And again, while Moses and Martha, they never legally get married. They do have a ceremony, which I'll talk about here in a bit. 10 days later, December 15th, 31-year-old David Salipe, taken into custody in Maputo, Mozambique, driving his Mercedes, which he apparently was trying to sell. In the trunk, detectives find newspaper clippings about the Cleveland serial killings, as well as footprints suggesting that somebody had been locked inside at some point, and they think they have arrested their man. He's brought back to South Africa, interrogated, housed in the Brixton Murder and Robbery Unit's lockup. This is a Thursday. The next day, December 16th, a Friday, was a public holiday, and because of that, Salipe will remain in a cell at the Brixton police station until after the weekend, a period of time in which detectives questioned him thoroughly. At some point, he apparently confessed to having killed 15 women in the Cleveland area, 4 more than police knew about. He was not questioned about 2 bodies found in Pretoria West, however. Salipe surprisingly waived his right to have legal representation present, also refused to sign a written confession, only acknowledged the murders verbally, something the police will come to regret very shortly. After the interrogation, Salipe agreed to take the detectives to the sites where he had left some bodies. On Saturday, December 17th, they get started. He takes the detectives to 3 sites they'd already found and 4 more that were undiscovered. And then on Sunday, December 18th, while Salipe is showing them yet another crime scene, disaster strikes. 3 of the 6 detectives investigating the murders, Felix Tite, Timothy Omgomozulu, Joseph Dutoy, they accompany Salipe, who's in handcuffs and ankle chains. Again, this is on Sunday, if I haven't said that. And at the Geldenhui station, they have to cross some rough terrain to get to one of the kill sites and to prevent Salipe from being injured, which might later have been used to accuse the detectives of, police brutality. His ankle chains are removed. Salipe pointed out the place where Amanda Titi had been found, describing how he had hidden her underwear in a plastic bag that he had buried nearby. Salipe's handcuffs were now removed so that he could show them this bag. And when Detective Tite bends down to retrieve the supposed bag, he's hit in the back of the head with a 4-inch thick branch, and he falls to the ground. Tite hears Detective Omgomozulu now yell, "Stop, stop!" as well as something in another language. I feel like everybody over there speaks at least fucking 3 languages. Then a gunshot rings out, and Salipe slumps to the ground, a big, gaping, fatal wound in his head. He's rushed to Johannesburg Hospital, where he dies at 5 p.m. Now there will be no more answers. No information about whether Salipe had accomplices, if he had used other people to source his female victims, where more bodies might be found, the names of some victims, nothing. All in all, this incident taints an investigation that had already logged 30,000 work hours, 500 miles of driving, 5,000 incoming, 6,000 outgoing calls, an investigation which otherwise had been going relatively well. After all, after 2 separate police forces began to coordinate, only 2 months had passed before they had their main suspect identified, and then an additional month before he was arrested, and that was after detectives tracked him all the way to a neighboring country. But now it's over. Only questions and accusations remain. The editor of the newspaper, Beeld, wrote on December 20th that 3 detectives should have been able to subdue a man armed with just a tree branch. And if shots had to be fired, why not at his legs? Why go straight for his head? It was crazy. Other newspapers speculated about the detectives' ulterior motives. Worried about the police's public image, one went so far as to speculate that, quote, an innocent man may have paid for the crimes of a monster who is still alive. Had Salipe killed anybody? Or did a mentally fragile man make a false confession and then be set up by the police to take the fall? The fact that the police failed to notify Salipe's estranged wife of his death, leading her to find out about it from neighbors who read about it in the papers, did not help them did not make them look any better. The police were now in hot shit. They had apprehended a suspect were 99% sure he was the killer, but now it was looking like they had taken the easy out as far as the investigation went, that they had accused somebody, killed them, to make everything look like it was neatly wrapped up. And then something else would happen to lend more credence to this possibility. Another body would be found, and on January 4th, 1995, half undressed in a field. She was severely decomposed, never identified. Police were understandably freaked the fuck out. Was this another victim of Salipe, or did Salipe somehow not kill anybody and their man was still out there? Or was this the work of a copycat? Later that month, Sithole paid his labala for Martha, a tradition amongst some indigenous African people for the groom to pay a number of cattle, or more often these days a sum of money, to the bride's family, so a dowry. So they are married, just not in South Africa's court system. Soon after that, though, something happened and the couple parted ways, after which Moses Sithole reportedly slept at train stations for a little while. So did Martha find out who he really was? We don't know. Another woman's dead body, we do know. This would be found February 9th, just over a month after the previous one. The victim was completely naked, but her clothes had been placed on top of her chest and weighted down with rocks. Her fingerprints were later used to confirm that she was 27-year-old Nuku Soko. She had gone missing in January on her way to visit her sister in Klipkat, not the famous cave, but the village. Less than a week later, on February 13th, the body of a young black woman was found in a patch of veld, or open, uncultivated grassland, near Village Deep, about 6 miles from Cleveland. Her clothes had been pushed up to above her hips. She'd been strangled with her underwear. During the last weekend of February, 4 women came forward with descriptions of black men, or a black man who had approached them separately with job offers during October and November of the previous year. They described him as attractive, with large eyes, said he wore expensive clothes, spoke Sotho, reportedly was a vegetarian who drank milk. When the women asked him about the Cleveland murders, he disappeared. Meanwhile, the woman found on February 13th would be identified by her brother as 22-year-old Nelsiwe Longa. Who the fuck is doing all this? I mean, of course, it's our man Moses Sithole, but the police don't know that. March 6th, police revealed to the media that Nelsiwe had not been killed by David Salipe, or whoever the fuck was truly responsible for the Cleveland murders. Despite the obvious similarities, there were some important differences, unfortunately, unnamed in sources, and the horrific discovery of more bodies would continue. On the morning of March 6th, construction workers digging a ditch in Atteridgeville arrived to find a woman's breasts, just her breast protruding from the soil. Goddamn. They uncovered the body of 25-year-old Sarah Matlakula Mokono. She had disappeared 3 days earlier on her way to meet someone who had promised her work, right? Same MO. Then the next day, April 12th, another body is discovered in Atteridgeville. This woman's hands had been tied behind her back with a bra. She had been strangled with some type of ligature, but it was unclear what that was. Although her clothes were recovered in the surrounding area, her panties were never found. She was later identified as Letta Namthendazo Inlanga Mandla, 25 years old. It was clear that the police either had not caught their guy or they had another guy they needed to catch now. On April 17th, a newspaper called Bild reported that 4 bodies were found, that the modus operandi seemed to be very similar to that of David Salipe. 2 days later, police would go public with their theory that these were the victims of a copycat, somebody who wanted to replicate Salipe's kills. The next day, April 20th, the body of a boy is discovered close to where Letta Inlanga Mandla's corpse had been found. He'd later be identified as Letta's 2-year-old son, Subosiso. He was found 60 feet away from his mother's body. Just like Sarah Matlakula Mokono, Letta had been on her way to a meeting with somebody she thought was going to offer her an awesome job. And without a babysitter, she brought her son along. He was found with a deep head wound, though it was unclear where he had died or whether Letta had died before him or not. If that was the case, it was possible that Subosiso died of exposure, sticking close to his mother's corpse because he didn't know what else to do. How fucking sad. May 13th, 1995, 29-year-old Esther Moshubidi Minyata's body is found in a cornfield near the neighborhood of Hercules in Pretoria West. Her lower body is nude. She's been strangled with an item of clothing. Sources do not say which item. She had last been seen the previous evening leaving a cafe and headed for home. Also in May of 1995, Moses Sithole got a job, like a regular actual job. Started working at a trucking company called Afrox. His job was to wash their trucks. And soon afterwards, he started asking a typist working there named Melody Stern to type him up some official-looking letters. Melody, naturally, wanted to know why the fuck she was typing these documents. And Sithole said, well, he was starting an organization in Atteridgeville. He wanted her to type forms that people could fill out at schools. teachers, or any person who suspected that somebody was being abused. He called his new organization, that was not an organization at all, it's all fake, but he called it the Child Protective Community Organization. And he had Melody drop membership recruitment forms. This motherfucker. So his new grift is to ask women if they want to work for an organization based in saving kids from child abuse. And then if they say yes, he'll use their good nature to lure them somewhere to be raped and killed. Next body found exactly a month later, although 5 women had gone missing in this time frame. Francina Nomsa Suteba, 25, found sitting against a tree June 13th, although she was wearing a dress. Closer examination revealed that her underwear, a handbag strap, had both been tied around her neck and then around the tree. So I think her underwear I'm guessing, like just the way it was written, stuffed in her mouth, handbag strap, hold it in place, and then just tying her to the tree. 3 days later, June 16th, Elizabeth Mothetsa's naked body, discovered in Roseland, an industrial area about 9 miles to the northwest of Pretoria. She's 19 years old, last seen alive May 25th. So far, 8 women have been found in Atteridgeville, 1 in Roseland. Now the media is getting very confused and worried. Newspapers begin raising more questions about Salipe's involvement in the Cleveland murders, since the modus operandi in that series and the one in Atteridgeville so very similar. Was Salipe ever actually involved in any murders, they wonder? What the hell is going on? Police spokespeople reiterate that they had forensic evidence linking Salipe to at least 6 of the Cleveland victims, but they do not release what this forensic evidence, supposed evidence is. Then the mystery deepens surrounding Salipe when on June 21st, Police Colonel and Station Commander Adrian Eager testified in Salipe's death inquest that there was uncertainty as to whether David Salipe was even David Salipe's real name. Who the fuck is this guy? Right, it's getting more confusing. Apparently, David Salipe had been found guilty of fraud back on May 2nd, 1995, long ways back, when he was caught with an identity document in the name of David Salipe that was not his. At the time, authorities could not establish to whom the booklet belonged, nor what the perpetrator's real name was, however. Consequently, he is sentenced as David Salipe, this fake name. He'd get 5 such identity booklets between May 1992, June 1994, further identifying him as David Salipe, but again, that is not his real name. Just a fucking mystery. June 22nd, 1995 now, Magistrate H.P. Stridham ruled that no one would be held accountable for David Salipe's death. He found that Sergeant Omgomozulu had acted in self-defense. And you know what? Maybe he did. Maybe that was one hell of a stick. And he was coming for Sergeant Omgomozulu with it. Maybe he was 6'6", 300 pounds of muscle. Maybe Sergeant Omgomozulu was 5'2", 130 pounds of mostly peanut brittle and anxiety. I don't know. Actually, I mean, if a dude's coming out with you with a fucking stick, self-preservation is going to be on your mind. Shouldn't have shot him in the head probably, but I don't know. I might have shot him in the head if he's coming at me with a stick. That same day, another body found in Rocherville, another Joburg suburb, just south of Harrietdale. I'm not confident on the pronunciation with Rocherville maybe. It's kind of hard to find videos on some of these smaller ones. Like the other victims, she had been raped and strangled. It was 30-year-old Ernestina Mohari Mosebo. Police found her ID nearby. 2 days later, June 24th, Nakiwe Diko's body found in Atteridgeville. She'd been missing since April 7th when she went to meet somebody about, what else, a job opportunity. Sadly, wild dogs had found her remains before investigators, and her body was in pieces. However, investigators were able to determine that her hands had been tied together with her underwear. They managed to find her skull the following day. It was 130 feet from her torso. Her pantyhose had been tied around her neck, wound so tightly with a stick that bone fragments were embedded in the material. A stick had also been shoved into her vagina. Damn. Violence is escalating, as it almost always does with these freaks. Her wedding ring still in her finger, and it was identified by her husband, that poor bastard. Now let's talk about somebody else. Absalom Songweni lived in a caravan in the Joburg suburb of Byers Park, Boxburg, east of the city in the same approximate area of Cleveland, where most of these bodies have turned up. On July 17th, 1995, he said he watched a man and a woman walk out into the wilderness some distance from his home. He called out to him, since he knew that there was a fence nearby, blocking them from continuing further. But the man responded that he knew the area. After a while, they disappeared from view. Absalom, however, he kept on watching. Sometime later, this guy reemerges, but now he's alone. And then Absalom thinks he sees something bright in the man's hand, and he's looking around furtively, a little suspiciously, like he'd been caught, doing something shameful, as Absalom would later testify over a year later. At this moment, before Absalom can do anything, the man runs. Instead of going after him, He heads into the field where he finds the woman he had seen earlier. She had clearly been assaulted. Absalom didn't know if she was alive or not. He runs to a nearby supermarket. He calls the police. Sergeant Gideon O'Neill would respond. O'Neill climbed through the fence, found the woman. She was still warm, but not breathing. He couldn't find a pulse. His partner arrived with a first aid kit, but they were unable to resuscitate her. She had been strangled with the belt off of her own dress. The woman was identified as Josephine Montsali Umlangeni. She was 25 years old, mother of 4. She had gone to meet somebody about, can you guess? I bet you can. Yep, potential job offer. Bodies just keep piling up. Police have to try something new. On the same day, a special investigating team is established under Captain Vinol Villian of the Pretoria Murder and Robbery Unit. And he wanted somebody who could come up with a distinctive psychological profile about this killer. And there was only one such person working in South Africa. We met her before, Mickey Pistorius. And with this team, Mickey goes through the files that describe the victims, how they'd been found, what the killer had done to them. And she ended up feeling uncertain about the confusing array of differences in the crimes. Some victims had been bound, others had not. Of those who had been bound, some had their hands tied in front, others behind them. It seemed very haphazard. They were unsure whether all the victims had been killed by the same man or not. And then the next day, Dimakatso Ramela is found in Pretoria West. Lying face down, she's clothed. The garrote used to strangle her still around her neck. She's only 21. She had disappeared 2 months previously, back on May 23rd. Then just a few days later, 28-year-old woman named Mildred Antilla Lepule was found July 26th in a canal near the Bonaccord Dam in Unastaport, about 9 miles north of Pretoria. Her pantyhose had been used to strangle her. Her panties had been pulled up, spread over her face. Her husband, Jimmy, would soon come forward with an interesting story. He said Mildred had been promised a clerical job that would have put her on track to become a social worker in 3 years by a man she called Ferry. She was supposed to be interviewed on June 1st by somebody named Professor Williams. And then just 3 days before her interview, she got a call from this Ferry fella who supposedly set up the interview with Williams. A jubilant Mildred told her husband that the interview had been brought forward by a day. Oh, fantastic. They're both excited for the extra income. What a blessing. But then she disappears. And then, well, Jimmy identifies her body, and how fucking gutting for him. Meanwhile, detectives now busy setting up an operations room to try and get more organized and catch this killer. As Mickey Pistorius was affixing the crime scene photos to a board, arranging them in the order in which the victims had been killed, she now sees a pattern, one that didn't emerge when they had not been looking at the order in which the bodies had been found. What she found was interesting. At first, the victims not bound. Then later, their hands are tied in the front with a piece of their clothing. A few murders later, their hands are now secured behind their backs. Similarly, the first victims had been throttled with bare hands. Then the killer began to use a ligature to strangle them, usually a bra or some other piece of clothing. Then he progressed to a garrote, where he would use a stick to wind up their clothing around their necks, a method providing increased control to the killer. So he was clearly evolving, becoming more efficient, more sadistic, developing his fantasy further. On August 8th, another body found at Unastaport. She was identified from items found in her handbag as 25-year-old Elsie Koti Masango. She'd been missing since July 14th. The next day, another body discovered in the same area. This one wouldn't be able to be identified because it had been burned beyond recognition. Most likely not purposefully, but due to a wildfire that had ravaged the area. The remains would never be identified conclusively. 2 weeks later, August 23rd, 30-year-old Oscarina Vuyokazi Jakalise's body is found near Boksburg. She had disappeared on the same day that Elise Masango's body had been found, August 8th. 2 more bodies will be found near the Bonaccord Dam, August 28th and 30th. Neither of them conclusively identified. This guy is killing at a very, very rapid pace now, more than one woman a week. And with so many police now swarming Unastaport, the killer starts to lead his victims elsewhere. Now police will begin finding bodies back in the Cleveland area, when unidentified remains are uncovered there September 12th. And the word Cleveland showing up again, well, that has to be a dead giveaway that I have to push this button.
Dead giveaway. Dead giveaway. My neighbor got big testicles because we see this dude every day.
Every day. Thank you, Charles Ramsey. Early September 1995 now, Monica Gabasile's grandmother, unnamed in sources, is worried. Her granddaughter disappeared just weeks after she had started seeing somebody new. Monica had said this guy's name was Moses Sithole. Strange to me how he will give an alias to many women, but not others. I wonder if initially he had no intention of killing Monica. Well, one day Monica said that Moses had called her to say that he had found a job. He found a job for her. He found work for her in Germiston. Oh my God, what are the odds? She left the next day, excited, well-dressed, prepared for a job interview, and then, of course, never came home. 3 days later, man phones again. Although he now said his name was Jabulain, Monica's grandmother recognized his voice. It was definitely Moses' voice. She said she didn't know where, she didn't know where this guy was calling from. Moses' name was submitted as yet another tip amongst hundreds of others, but nothing comes of it. Days after this phone call, the police find a whole bunch more bodies. September 17th, 1995, Dr. Mervyn Mansell is asked by police to assist them in determining the time of death of a body discovered in a field at the Van Dyke mine near Boksburg, South Africa. Dr. Mansell, an entomologist, fancy talk for a bug studier, a man who worked at the Agricultural Research Council in Pretoria, was contacted by Inspector Vivian Bealt, who had read about maggots being used to estimate the post-mortem interval fairly accurately. And he wanted to know, Vivian is a man here, he wanted to know if Dr. Mansell would be interested in working with the police, and Dr. Mansell agreed to bring his bugs over. This would be the entomologist's very first forensic case. He had no idea what to expect, this poor son of a bitch. While he's trying to prepare himself during the drive to Boksburg, he tells himself that, is told that there is actually not just one body, but 5 bodies. By the time he arrives at the site, even more bodies had been discovered. The police had found a mass grave. By the next day, authorities located a total 10 bodies, 10 women's bodies in varying degrees of decomposition, which meant the killer had returned to the same place again and again and again. And Dr. Mansell now had 10 times the amount of work he had expected, that he had signed up for. He would encounter 10 times the horror. This was not what this dude agreed to do when he took his job in Pretoria. This poor bastard really thrown into the fire here. He tried to view the bodies as mere organic remains and not people, so he didn't get his mind fucked up and he got to work. And what he found was fascinating. As he told Ruda Landman in her interview on a South African TV program called Carte Blanche, which aired April 13th, 2003, he said, when we examined the bodies, it turned into a very interesting scientific scenario because there were bodies in all stages of decomposition. So we got a huge amount of baseline information on the first day. Well, the first body had been discovered Saturday evening, September 16th, when a police reservist took his dog to hunt some rabbits in the field. More than 30 members of the police, including detectives from the East Rand Murder and Robbery Unit, as well as forensic experts, searched the area for evidence during the next couple of days. Helicopters circled overhead. Dogs sniffed cautiously at the freshly turned earth. Mickey Pistorius was also on the scene. Just a year into her new profiling career, she is confronted with her most disturbing evidence yet. In her first book, Catch Me a Killer, she would describe the area as, quote, one of the most horrific crime scenes I had ever seen. Decomposed bodies were strewn over the veld, some only meters away from others. Maggots were feasting, and the stench penetrated our nostrils and clung to our clothing. In fact, all 10 bodies lay within a radius of about 300 yards. They seemed to be everywhere. Forensic evidence showed that it was likely that the latest victims had been killed at the scene. For her part, Mickey did not find it hard to imagine the killer leading his victim into the field amongst the rotting bodies, paralyzing his victim with fear before he then raped and killed her. She spotted one victim with a stain on her jeans, suggested she had wet herself in terror. That seemed to confirm Mickey's beliefs. Mickey found the location of the body dump site particularly interesting. It was located only a little over 3 miles from the Boksburg prison, a proximity that seemed much more than coincidence to Mickey, although she wasn't quite sure what it meant. In addition, there were numerous items of what police would term ritualistic significance scattered across the fields. Black and red candles, feathers, mirrors, knives, lingerie, more. To investigators, these seemed to be items associated with traditional healing. Traditional healers, or sangomas, still are prevalent in South Africa. Sangomas, who can be either male or female, play a lot of different social and political roles in traditional South African communities. They're involved in divination, healing, directing rituals, finding lost cattle, protecting warriors via protective medicine known as muti and more. Muti in particular, a very problematic area since it can be prepared using anything from roots to animal pieces to human body parts, especially the eyes, organs, and genitals. Ingredients that are used, for some fucking dark magic, essentially. Which ingredients are used probably depends on the morality of the healer. Some of them, their morals don't seem to be too good. There have been numerous accounts of muti murders, frequently involving babies or young kids in both South Africa and other nations. For example, December 13th, 2004, a 43-year-old traditional healer appeared in the Wynberg Magistrates Court in Cape Town, accused of raping a 30-year-old woman leaving her naked, stabbed, and her throat cut underneath the bed. She survived, but the man abducted her 9-month-old son, murdered the baby, and left him in a ditch. Apparently that murder was committed after an influential Sangoma told him that this killing would assist him in amassing great power and wealth. That same sort of strange muti ritual had been practiced in the Van Dyke mine, or the possibility of it being practiced there did not seem out of question. And Mickey Pistorius knew that it would just be a matter of time now before the killer struck again. He was still refining his techniques. 4 of the bodies at the mine showed the killer had tied their hands to their necks now, effectively having them strangle themselves the more they struggled. Unsurprising, the crime scene received an immense amount of attention. President Nelson Mandela himself came to the site, met all the detectives, other forensic experts at the scene. Commissioner of the South African Police, George Fivas, meanwhile, announced that there would be a 500,000 rand reward equivalent to $136,000 for any info that led to the arrest of the killer. The media was present in full force, inadvertently ensuring that the killer would seek out a new dump site. Mickey Pistorius knew that, and she had a plan. In June of 1995, she'd attended a conference in Scotland where she met Robert Ressler and Roy Hazelwood, both retired FBI profilers. She contacted Ressler now, and he immediately agreed to fly down to South Africa to help her, arriving September 23rd. That's fucking badass. Love Ressler, working pro bono to save South African lives. Hail Nimrod. 2 days later, while a prayer service is being organized for the evening at the Boksburg site, they get to work. First, Mickey presents her profile of the killer. There have been 3 discrete locations where 27 total bodies have been found. 8 women found in or near Atteridgeville, along with the 2-year-old boy. 6 women found in the area surrounding Unastaport, and 12 women found in the Boksburg area. There was also 1 woman found near Cleveland, and since the killer regularly used one dumping site multiple times, it was safe to assume more bodies would show up near Cleveland in the future. The media now starts calling this killer, in some media reports, the ABC killer, as in Atteridgeville, Boksburg, Cleveland. The fact that the killer used dumping sites multiple times indicated he was quite familiar with them. Despite indications that the women were assaulted and killed at the scenes where they were found, there was very little physical evidence. This indicated an organized, intelligent offender who'd grown in confidence over the past several months. The original Atteridgeville victims had been scattered. The Unastaport victims had been left closer together. The Boksburg victims almost on top of one another. There was also no attempt at concealment, meaning he was getting more arrogant, which was great for investigators. The more arrogant the killer becomes, the more likely he's going to make a mistake that'll lead to his arrest. His victims all very similar, lower to middle class women in their 20s, early 30s, all well-groomed, most, if not all, lured by the promise of a job or a better job. Mickey assumed that since the victims were so similar, the killer had one original victim in mind, which he did, a person whose death was replicated over and over again through the murders of these similar-looking women. Mickey's final profile would be published in her book, Strangers on the Street. She said, 1, black male, in his late 20s or early 30s. 2, he will be self-employed with access to money. 3, he will drive an expensive car. 4, he will wear flashy clothes and jewelry. 5, he will be competent socially, charming, and a ladies' man. 6, he will probably be married, separated, or divorced. 7, he will visit clubs, bars, generally enjoy socializing. 8, he might have a rap sheet for fraud or theft. 9, he was likely to tell somebody that he was the killer or that he knew the killer's identity. 10, he will follow reports of the murders and the police investigation in the press. 11, he will detest women, despite being very charming to them. 12, he will masturbate after the crimes, collect mementos, later dispose them. 13, he will have a high sex drive and use pornography. 14, there was some kind of exposure to sexual violence in his past, perhaps as a juvenile. 15, he will be very intelligent and streetwise. Well, Robert Ressler agreed, added some of his own insights. He predicted that the killer's masturbatory fantasies will be aggressive, as he believed women were merely objects to be abused. To that end, he will enjoy approaching women in a calculating way, buttering them up with full knowledge that he intends to kill them. Although he's working with Mickey Pistorius on the profile of the Atteridge serial killer, the National Commissioner asked Ressler to also look into David Salipe, that case as well. And the 2 profilers come to a number of conclusions. The evidence indicated that Salipe had been involved in the Cleveland murders in some way. 2, it was likely that the Atteridgeville killer, was working with an accomplice. 3, it was possible that Salipe and the Atteridgeville killer may have known each other, may have even worked together. And then shortly after these insights are gathered, there will be another break in this case. A handbag is recovered from the Boksburg scene. Inside it, police find an ID card belonging to one of the victims, Amelia Rapodile. When they contacted her coworkers, they learned that she had an appointment with a dude named Moses Sithole, September 7th. His name comes up again. September 7th, the day she disappeared, she had something else in her bag as well, an application for a job for an organization called Youth Against Human Abuse. Abuse? The fuck? That Sithole bullshit organization called Youth Against Human Abuse. Have you been abused? Is someone abusing you? Well, you need to fucking reach out to Youth Against Human Abuse. When they tracked down the phone number on the application form, they met a woman named Quasi Sithole in Wattville, an area southeast of Boxburg. She's Moses' sister. She says she has no idea where her brother is, that he didn't live at her house, and she hadn't seen him in months. Now, is she lying? More importantly, is Moses their guy? They don't know for sure yet. Soon the task force will come across more evidence pointing to Moses, though. Trifina Mogazzi, one of the murdered women, had worked at Kids Haven, an organization helping street kids, in Benoni, a town just east of Boxburg. One of her coworkers had told police that a dude visited Kids Haven, told them about potential jobs at his similar organization, Youth Against Human Abuse. He had spoken to Trifina too. She'd been very excited. They'd even made an appointment to discuss his offer. Moira Simpson, a social worker, confirmed that Moses Sithole had visited Kids Haven twice. The first time, he was actually accompanied by a photographer from the Star named Peter Magubani. Peter's actually a fucking world-renowned photojournalist, won a shitload of awards. It's fucking wild. He got tricked too. And they brought along 2 destitute teenage girls. Second time, he came alone, but showed them the article about Youth Against Human Abuse in the Star and said that he wanted to organize a fundraiser for street children. He's a fucking good con man. A few days later, Trifina goes missing. Moses Sithole definitely looking like he's the serial killer they've been chasing. Only problem is nobody seems to know where the fuck he is. And he's still killing. Mere week after the discovery of the 10 bodies at the Van Dyke mine became widely known, 20-year-old Agnes Sibogile Mobule, she disappeared on her way to meet a friend. Her body was found October 3rd at the Kleinfontaine train station near Benoni. Then on the same day, a strange call comes in, but not to the police. On October 3rd, a man called the office of the Star, this newspaper in Cape Town, and spoke with a reporter named Tamsin DeBeer, who happened to answer the phone. The man said that his name was Joseph Magawine. He said he was the Gauteng serial killer. Gauteng is the province in which Johannesburg and Pretoria are located. Some media reports were referring to this killer as the Gauteng serial killer. He said, "I'm the man that is so highly wanted," adding that he would like to surrender. Tamsin quickly tied up their conversation, contacted the police. Then soon, this dude calls back. He would actually call the newspaper 3 more times in October, and all 3 of these calls would be recorded by the police. Over these 4 conversations in total, Joseph gave further details about the murders and his own background, saying he had only begun killing because a woman had falsely accused him of rape. You know, he's the victim. He's the real victim. He said that as a result of this false accusation, he had been convicted and imprisoned, and he claimed he'd been abused by his fellow convicts and it was all her fucking fault. He said, "I force a woman to go where I want, and when I go there, I tell them, 'Do you know what? I was hurt, so I'm doing it now.' Then I kill them." I mean, I guess that seems fair. Yeah, okay. No. He also had plenty of information on how the women had been killed. He said that he used the victims' clothing to strangle them, that he preferred underwear because it, quote, left no fingerprints. Like Mickey thought, he had also taken pleasure in the fact that his new victims saw his former victims' corpses in the dumping grounds where he took them to die. Although he accepted responsibility for the murders in Pretoria, Atteridgeville, and Boxburg, he denied any involvement in the Cleveland killings. He vehemently denied killing Letta Nglanga Mandala, and in particular her 2-year-old son, stating that he loved children. But he took no issue with being labeled a serial killer who, raped and killed a lot of women. He went on to claim that he had killed 76 women, twice as many as were known. To prove it, or at least prove some of it, he provided the location of another body, one the police had not yet found. The police will find this body. So it's all adding up that this guy is clearly their killer. The body he mentioned found October 9th near a Jupiter area train station. But even though he was now confessing everything, that didn't mean he had any intention of stopping or even slowing down. Natombi and the Benny's body, discovered in Germiston, October 11th, the day after she went missing. A comb had been used to tighten her pantyhose around her neck. Star reporter, that Tamsin DeBeer, the woman who'd answered Moses' first call, and then spoke with him the next 3 times he called the Star as well, organized a meeting now with Joseph at a train station, but then Joseph doesn't show up. Then the Star publishes a picture they'd acquired of Moses Sithole, October 13th, appealing to the public to come forward with any information they had about the son of a bitch. Very next day, October 14th, a body is found at the Village Main Reef mine near Johannesburg. Shoelaces had been used to bind the victim's neck to a tree this time. This woman will never be identified. That same day, Moses Sithole seems to realize his situation is getting pretty dire. The walls are closing in. He decides to contact his sister's husband, Maxwell, saying he needs a gun to protect himself. And Maxwell apparently agreed. It's like, oh yeah. They make an appointment to meet in the Mintex factory in Benoni, where Maxwell worked. But since Moses' sister Quasi had long been in touch with the police, the couple went right to the authorities with this new information, including the time and place of the meeting. Fuck yeah, bro. Good for them. Let's get him. October 18th, 1995, Captains Vino Villian and Frans van Nijkerk seize this opportunity. They meet with the factory's management. They arrange to have Inspector Francis Molovetsi pose as a security guard. At 9 p.m. that evening, Sithole arrives at the factory, asks for Maxwell. The other guards tell Inspector Molovetsi to go and fetch Maxwell since he's a new guy. But there's just one problem. Molovetsi does not feel comfortable leaving Sithole alone when he goes to look for Maxwell. And after a moment of kind of hedging, Sithole gets suspicious and runs. Molovetsi gives chase, pursues him through a dark alley where he identifies himself as a police officer and fires 2 warning shots. Sithole, though, not going to surrender so easily. No, instead of trying to slip away, he goes nuclear. And he had a fucking axe either on him or finds an axe very quickly, and he comes back at Inspector Molovetsi with this axe. Molovetsi will later describe the events in court, saying he turned back and had an object in his hand, came towards me, my life was in danger, and I fired a shot at his legs. He kept on fighting. He hit me on my right hand, I fired some more shots. He fell to the ground. In the end, the police officer managed to shoot Sithole in the stomach and the leg. No headshots this time. He wanted to make sure this fucker stayed alive. Well, Sithole is taken to the Glenwood Hospital in Benoni. He's operated on the next day. Now all the policemen, profilers, and commissioners are holding their breaths. They need Sithole to be alive so he can hopefully give information about his murders, help families with closure. Sithole will survive. 2 days after the surgery, October 21st, he's transferred to one military hospital in Pretoria where security is much tighter. The strict security, probably more to protect Sithole from the community than vice versa, since he is not in much of a condition to escape with his wounds. Also, he is found to be HIV positive. Martha, his former partner, will visit him 3 times after his arrest, but when she finds out about his HIV status, she will stop entirely. Naturally, news of his arrest spreads like wildfire. Not everybody's happy about it. In Wattville, residents are furious that Quasi Sithole, a local, had not come forward with info about her brother sooner. Overall, the underlying emotions seem to be related to fear. 2 serial killers have been apprehended in as many years. Who was to say another wasn't coming? Or that Moses didn't have an accomplice who was still out on the loose? Was it really over now? Well, detectives have a lot of work to do still. They began with questioning Sithole in his hospital bed. Both Captains Vino Villian and Frans van Nijkerk will visit Sithole in one military hospital, but he is reluctant to answer their questions. But then a female detective enters the room, and Sithole begins describing some of his crimes. And this is fucking new. This motherfucker blatantly jerks off beneath his hospital bed sheets while he does so. While he's talking to the detective, he is fucking beating off. And apparently they just let him keep jerking. Getting the info was more important than making sure that he didn't jerk off in front of a female detective. That is fucking insane. Just Moses would probably say, between strokes or maybe mid-stroke, I can point out the place in Atteridgeville, as well as in Hercules. That's where it started. Near to Johannesburg, I did not kill people. Because that's where I stayed. I did not even count. So that happened in real life. I don't know if he has much lotion, the fucking fella from that sound clip, but the locations were chosen before the victims. He said he killed only during daytime and supposedly raped only the ones he found attractive. He said, in Atteridgeville, I killed many, about 10. I caught them with my hands around the neck and strangled them. I thought of something to tie them up. I used stockings. I placed it around their necks. I heard fuck all if they spoke to me and thought about other things. The shit I had to witness, by the way, to find that sound effect. A lesser man, a better man, a lesser perverted man would have given up. Yeah, it's not a video. That's just a sound clip. Okay, everything's on the internet. Sithole would claim that he would masturbate one last time as he watched his victims die. And ever proud of himself, he denied having an accomplice, wanted to take full credit. Sithole would later claim the detectives gave him a list of names, though, and how they died, and then told him to say that information back to them on a recording. Of course, that's bogus. Sithole himself had requested to speak without a lawyer, and when he gave his statements to police at the hospital. When Tony Richard, Tony Dick, a legal aid attorney, arrived at the hospital, he was informed that Sithole did not want representation, but he didn't believe the police. Spoke to Sithole himself. Sithole told Tony Dick that his wife was going to get him a lawyer, a better lawyer than Tony Dick. And then detectives continued to speak with Sithole alone, as they had been led to believe was okay. Magistrate Gravenstein was then brought in to take down. Why doesn't fucking anybody in South Africa have a name like Smith? Like every fucking name has 17 letters at least. Magistrate Gravenstein then brought in to take down Sithole's confession. The magistrate, too, advised Sithole that he could get a lawyer. And now Sithole said that the police had not allowed him to see anyone, not even a lawyer, and the magistrate subsequently refused to take his confession. Damn it. Another magistrate is brought to the hospital, at which point Sithole confesses again. But then later he'll say this was also done under duress, as the police had been furious that he had made fools of them with Magistrate Gravenstein. Yeah, this from a guy who clearly loved to confess. Right? He called a newspaper 4 times just to fucking talk somebody's ear off and confess. Wonder if he was jerking off while he's on the phone there too. Probably. I just, couldn't hear it. On November 3rd, Sithole, 1995, is released from one military hospital, transported to Boksburg prison, where he had served his earlier sentence for rape. This is also the prison located just a couple of miles away from one of those mass graves, right, that the profiler thought, this is an interesting location. He's kept in a solitary cell where he would reside until his trial begins, except for the times he's taken out by police to identify crime scenes. Police had no qualms about treating him like the piece of shit he was. On one excursion, he complained that he was in pain, and Captain Villian went into a cafe, bought a packet of Smarties candy, put some of these candies into Sithole's mouth, told him to swallow, not to chew, like they were pain medication. And Sithole did that, believed him, and was like, yeah, I feel a lot better now. That's fucking great. That's a good way to establish how full of shit he was. Over the following weeks, Sithole would take the detectives to numerous locations, including on November 6th, the Gosforth Park mine dumps west of Germiston, where he killed his last victim. She would never be conclusively identified. Sithole was also taken to Dr. Lorna Martin, a district surgeon, to determine whether he had been harmed and physically coerced by the police. Dr. Martin would go on to become the head of the Department of Forensic Medicine and Toxicology at the University of Cape Town. She was no dummy. She found him to be excessively polite and full of shit. He also supposed he didn't even jerk off one time in front of her. Oh. That's fucking crazy. She found no evidence to back up his claims of abuse. Oh. Okay, let's stop now. It's hard to pause that thing. Sithole first appeared in court November 13th, 1995, shuffling in on crutches. Many people, including relatives of many of the victims, attended. They were understandably fucking outraged. For seeing an emotional crowd, the building housing the Brockpan Magistrates Court is sealed off with razor wire, guarded by heavily armed police officers. Some people are disappointed when they arrived too late to see the suspect, since his case was heard at 7:30 a.m. and was now postponed for further investigation. They vowed to camp out at the building the next time Sithole appeared. December 5th, Sithole reappears in the magistrate's court. His attorney, I said he wanted a better one, but he used Tony Richard. Tony presented a letter from psychiatrist Dr. Leon Fine to the judge proposing that Sithole be sent in for clinical observation. Apparently, Sithole had suffered some head injuries during previous assaults and boxing matches, and these prevented him from understanding the full extent of his actions, so he couldn't be fully guilty, of course. Bullshit. It was clear to everybody observing that was not the case. These were not spur-of-the-moment killings. They were carefully planned attacks where he went, to tremendous lengths to cunningly mislead women, to lure them away from other people, to leave almost no evidence behind. Still, the judge ordered that Sithole be transferred to the Krugersdorp prison, where he could be observed at nearby Starkfontein Psychiatric Hospital. March 6th, the psychiatric reports are finally complete. They had determined that he's a fucking douchebag. No, that doesn't say in sources exactly what mental illness he may or may not have been suffering from. Or I guess not suffering from makes no sense. It wouldn't be like, well, he doesn't have this. The court was informed that Sithole did not exhibit any evidence of injury or disorder, which could preclude his comprehension of right and wrong. He is fit to stand trial. And when the trial begins, Sithole will listen to the proceedings with what will become his characteristic grin. He's fucking loving the attention. Meanwhile, a large contingent of women have gathered outside the building, demanding that Sithole be delivered to them. The request was, of course, denied, unfortunately. Sithole instead returned to Boksburg prison, where he waits his trial that's now scheduled for this fall. Mid-September, Sithole receives a new private attorney, Eben Jordan. Fuck you, Tony Dick. Eben's fees, although 20% below his usual rates, would be carried by the state. He's a very expensive top-tier attorney. Eben had a big task ahead of him. September 30th, newspapers reported that Moses Sithole will be charged with 38 counts of murder, 40 counts of rape, 6 counts of robbery. Damn, that's wild. Wild that they had enough evidence for 38 murders. 4 of the murder charges related to women previously attributed by the police to the alleged Cleveland serial killer David Satle. That revelation does not go down well with reporters who had never really accepted the circumstances around Satle being shot in the head. Reporters who felt he had been scapegoated. The fact that one of these women, Amanda Titi, had been found at the scene Satle had been pointing out when he was shot exacerbated the situation even further. Was David Satle actually a serial killer? If he was involved in the Cleveland murders, to what extent was he involved? Did he work alone? Did he and Moses Sithole know each other? If so, what exactly was the extent of the relationship? All these questions are being asked. Sithole's trial finally begins October 21st, 1996. At the same time, another massive trial was being held. It was already underway in South Africa. During the apartheid years, the security police were used to deal with political threats against the government, often imprisoning people unjustly. The C-10 counterinsurgents unit under Colonel Eugene de Kock. Oh, fuck yeah. Now we got a guy named de Kock in this suck. Was involved in numerous executions of political opponents at Vlok Pass. This farm 20 miles west of Pretoria that was the C-10's headquarters in the 1980s, including the murder of civil rights activist Griffith Muthinga and the murders of 4 members of the Chesterville Youth Organization in the summer of 1986. Nicknamed Prime Evil by the press, de Kock, and that is truly how you pronounce his name. I checked multiple sites. De Kock would disclose the full scope of C-10's crimes and acknowledge the loss the family suffered of the victims he was instructed to murder. When the African National Congress came to power in 1994. In 1996, as Sithole's trial is beginning, de Kock is in the middle of testifying, defending himself against 89 charges. Neither man knew that they would be spending the remainder of their lives in the same prison block, or at least they were supposed to spend the remainder of their lives in the same prison block. De Kock will be sentenced to 2 life sentences, plus an additional 212 years in prison for crimes against humanity. The 89 charges he was convicted of included 6 counts of murder, as well as conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, assault, kidnapping, illegal possession of a firearm, and fraud. But still, despite all that, in 2015, after serving less than 20 years, he's released on parole. That's cool. Just put Prime Evil back on the streets at the age of 65. Like, that's not insulting to the families of his victims at all. Guessing the fact that he is white and his victims are black, maybe had something to do with that early release. In Sithole's trial, Deputy Attorney General Retha Menkes prosecuted while Justice David Kerlewis presided. Eben Jordan continued to represent Sithole. Tony Dick, still out there fucking flapping in the wind. The first 3 charges related to rapes that had taken place during 1987 and 1988, or the first 3 charges were related to those rapes. These women testified first. Patricia Kumalo, Dorcas Kobani, Sibogile Nkosi, and Lindiwe Nkosi. Eben Jordan asked Patricia if she was not mistaken, if the person who had raped her was actually David Satle, maybe. She said nope. She said she saw Sithole's picture in the papers after his arrest, recognized him immediately as her attacker, and she recognized him before her now in the court. Sibogile testified as well about how she'd been abused by Moses Sithole. Jordan said she was lying, that his client had never laid a hand on her, and Sibogile asked if she should take off her clothes so that he could see her scars himself. Damn, scars. He fucking raped and attacked her so badly, she still had visible scars. On November 12th, the trial had to be suspended when Sithole began to literally bleed in court. He'd fallen over the weekend, reopened the gunshot wound to his leg. He was taken to the hospital, leaving a trail of blood in his wake. The trial will be back in full swing soon, though. November 18th, Sapiwe Ngwenya, who had worked at Kids Haven, took the stand, identifying the man in the security camera photo as Moses Sithole. He had an appointment with Sapiwe's coworker, Trifina Mogatsi, on the day Trifina disappeared. Similarly, a man named Dan Makwina testified that he had been sitting with Elizabeth Mathetsa outside their offices early in 1995. A man had walked up to them. Elizabeth had introduced him to Dan as Sello, her boyfriend. Dan saw Sello again a week before Elizabeth disappeared, May 25th, 1995. And he said Sello is, of course, that motherfucker right there, Moses Sithole. There was also Pete Tsotiti, a truck driver who testified that he received numerous calls on his cell phone from young women inquiring about a job offer. He had known nothing about it, hadn't made the connection when the call stopped shortly after Moses' arrest. Then he recognized the man who had been employed at his company to wash the trucks, and everything clicked, started to make sense. Another woman, unnamed in sources, described how her sister, Elsie Masango, had been talking to a man named Pete Tosititi, who had offered Elsie a job shortly before she disappeared. And there were women who had narrowly avoided becoming his victim, like Wilhelmina Ramfisa, who had met a man named David Nangobane in March of 1995. He offered her a job. She had filled out an application, but he had never called her back. A month later, she saw his face on TV, learned his real name was Moses Sithole. Others had escaped with a weird encounter, no way to put it together until the horrifying truth emerged. An ex-girlfriend, Mary Magat Lahoha, described how she had dated Moses Sithole, whom she knew as Charles, shortly before his arrest, how he had given her a watch that would later be identified as belonging to victim Trifina Magatsi. Mary described how Sithole had accused her of raping him after their relationship ended and weirdly stealing exactly $82 from him. Okay. Over the following days, different fathers described the agony of having to identify their battered and broken daughters. Various husbands described the pain of losing their wives. Sithole just sat and fucking smiled like the piece of shit he was. Probably snuck in a couple jerks. Oh, yeah. That's fun to hear. Jesus Christ. The final nail in Sithole's coffin was a testimony of Moses' sister Kwazi, who told the court about how Moses would give out her phone number to women he had promised jobs to. She said she was still getting phone calls about jobs. How many potential victims were still out there? There was now still the matter of Sithole's arrest to deal with, the accusations of police brutality. Undoubtedly, the prosecution was deeply worried that Ibn Jordan would paint a picture of sadistic police officers brutalizing another black South African man, a well-known image from the days of apartheid. And as predicted, after Inspector Molovedzi described the events surrounding Sithole's apprehension, Ibn Jordan painted a very different picture during cross-examination. According to Sithole's version, he merely bumped into the police officer when he turned around to say he was sorry. Apologies. The officer drew his gun, fired multiple shots. Moreover, the lawyer claimed Sithole never had an axe. Who would the judge believe? Well, on December 3rd, 1996, a video is shown in the Pretoria Supreme Court that'll help the judge side with the police. The image quality is poor, but those in the courtroom are able to see and hear Moses Sithole clearly as he speaks about the women he has murdered. It was, in essence, a full confession. The video was made by fellow inmates in Boksburg prison not long after Sithole's arrest. Charles Schoeman, Jacques Rogue, and Mark Halligan, former police officers, have been involved in a $491,800 diamond robbery in Amanzimtoti in 1995. They also murdered an accomplice, landing them a hefty prison sentence, the exact number of years, not reported in sources. Jacques Rogue met Sithole in the infirmary where the former slept due to his diabetes. Apparently, Sithole asked Rogue if he could steal some pills so that he could commit suicide. But first he wanted to tell his story. Schoeman, Rogue, Halligan, and Sithole then all signed a contract whereby they would share the profits from the sale of Sithole's story. Sithole's share would go to his daughter, Bridget. It was not lost on nobody in the courtroom how comfortable Moses Sithole appears in the video, leaning back, smoking, smiling, laughing sometimes as he describes the women he killed. He described how the first woman he killed shouted at him when he asked her for directions to where she was to meet him for her job. This, according to him, was in July of 1995. Apparently, he managed to calm her down, arranged to meet her at a later date. Then, when he met her, he fucking throttled her. He said, "I cannot remember her name. I killed her. I left her there. I went straight home and had a shower." In all, he said he killed 29 women, which is a different number than he gave earlier. He said, "I don't know where the other 9 come from. If there was blood or injuries, they were not my women." He claimed that all his victims had reminded him of the woman who falsely accused him of rape in 1989 and ruined his life. Also claimed that he didn't rape any of them, although some offered to sleep with him in order for him to love them. Some women he claimed he let go because he, quote, saw they were sincere and without pretensions. Oh, what a fucking gentleman. In addition, he said that he strangled his victims from behind because he didn't like to see their faces, despite the fact that he liked to scare them by showing them the rotting corpses of earlier victims. On the video, Schoeman asked Sithole if there was any victim that stood out to him more than the others. And in response, Sithole told him about Amelia Rapodile, one of the 10 women found at the Van Dyke mine. He said, quote, "She started to fight. I gave her a chance to fight, and I tell her, if you lose, you die. She was using her feet and kicked me. Then she tried to grab my clothes, but she could not grab me. I just tell her bye-bye. At one stage, when Sithole is describing these murders, he languidly bites into an apple. Right? This is amazing. A confession delivered right into the police's hands, but there's questions. First of all, how did 3 inmates get their hands on a video camera? The Department of Correctional Services wanted to launch an internal investigation, but Deputy Attorney General Aretha Menkes asked them to pause that until the video could be shown at trial. Still, since it's illegal both to make a recording in prison and to publish a prisoner's life story without the written authorization of the commissioner of the DCS, apparently a law in South Africa, Schoeman and the others face possible criminal charges now. Any potential financial gain, highly unlikely. And with all that drama, the trial gets postponed. When the trial resumed, January 29th, 1997, Winnie Mandela, ex-wife of President Mandela, present in the courthouse. Sithole smiled at her. She stared solemnly back. No word if he was whacking it or not when they locked eyes. He might have been. He might have been. Week later, Charles Schoeman revealed that he did not want to testify. He was apparently in fear for his life now. Since his involvement with the video, he'd been threatened multiple times, he said. He wrote in a letter to the Boksburg Prison Prisoners Executive Committee, quoted in the Star, February 6, 1997, that, quote, "Since the day all this became known, my whole life has been turned upside down, and now I'm being harassed and intimidated to such an extent that I can no longer see my way open to testify for the prosecution in this matter. I should have kept my mouth shut. I should have stayed out of this affair." He also claimed a warden had helped him obtain that video equipment. Well, turns out you can't just ask to not testify after you have agreed to testify, and on February 10th, Schoeman took the stand in exchange for legal immunity regarding his involvement in making the video, provided he testify honestly. During his testimony, he said that originally he and others had merely made audio recordings of Sithole's confession. Schoeman then contacted the police and Captain Leon Nell of the East Rand Murder and Robbery Unit. They provided him with the video recording equipment via a delivery by Schoeman's wife. Since there was now police involvement and Sithole had not been told that the recordings would be used during his trial, nor had he been informed of his rights prior to the recordings, Eben Jordan argued this should not be admissible. And this was a good time for Sithole's defense to bring up the fact that the confession at one military hospital might not be admissible either, as Sithole claimed he had been coerced. Well, now this shit drags on for months, as detectives attempt to prove Sithole's guilt with everything from voice comparison analysis, from Sithole's voice to the voice that had called the newspaper and given 4 confessions, also with DNA evidence. And then finally, July 29th, 97, the judge denies Sithole's motions and the confessions are accepted into evidence. So that's fucking huge. It's a slam dunk now. August 15th, the prosecution now closes its case. It had taken almost a year and $229,500 US. They had never conclusively linked Moses Sithole to David Salipe. Did they work together? Were victims wrongly attributed to one or the other? How would Salipe or Sithole know about the burial sites for victims they didn't kill? Seeing that those questions will now remain unanswered. Like the case of the phone call placed to Dora Makawena's employer, Sithole was not charged with that murder. It remained attributed to David Salipe. But Martin was also one of Moses' preferred aliases. Did Sithole also murder Dora? Did Salipe just take the name Martin from Sithole? Maybe they were friends. That's where the long pause came from when he was asked his name. Did Sithole place the call? Did they kill together again? We're not going to know. In the case of Amanda Titi alone, things are utterly indecipherable. Sithole knew Amanda. He had visited her house. He attended her funeral, but Salipe pointed out the location where Amanda's body had been found. That's fucking weird. Sithole, later identified by his own sister as the man photographed while using Amanda's bank card, though, August 2nd. His DNA also found on Amanda's body. Looks like they probably killed together, Sithole and Salipe. Did Sithole, by some exceedingly bizarre coincidence, have sex with Amanda earlier that day? Borrow or steal her bank card, then Salipe killed her later? Did police coerce Salipe into pointing out that site? Is it relevant that he was shot dead at that particular scene? If anything was clear, it was that, at the very least, Moses Sithole had killed a lot of women, though. Meanwhile, the defense decided to risk it all and put Sithole on the stand. He would tell the court that he knew nothing. He had done nothing. Everything he had said in his multiple confessions had been fed to him by the police. He did admit to knowing one of the rape victims, Lindiwe Nkosi, stating that her sister had been his girlfriend at the time, but he denied raping her. In addition, in a rambling, incoherent speech, he professed his innocence for the rape for which he had been sent to jail in 1989. The Star, August 27th, 1997, describes Sithole's testimony as rambling, often incoherent. That is fucking painful. I don't know if I'm torturing you or me with that. Finally, December 4th, 1997, Justice David Kerr-Lewis. such a ridiculous recording, was ready to pass judgment on Moses Sithole. The judge found Moses Sithole guilty on 40 fucking charges of rape, 38 charges of murder, 6 charges of robbery. He gets away with nothing. Took 3 full hours to read the verdict. The packed courtroom, though, not happy that the sentencing would not be pronounced the next day. Relatives of the victims wanted Sithole delivered to them now. 2 days later, after a slight delay, December 6, 97, Moses Sithole is sentenced to 2,410 years in prison. You heard that right. 2,410 years in prison. He got 12 years for each of the 40 rapes, 50 years for each of the 38 murders, another 5 years for each of the 6 robberies, bringing the total to 2,410 years. Those sentences would not run concurrently. The judge recommended no possibility of parole for 930 years. I love it. It seemed like considerable overkill for some, for a man with HIV expected back then to develop into AIDS, but the judge, an advocate of capital punishment, wanted to make a point. Judge stated he would have definitely imposed the death penalty, but that was not a viable option at that time legally. So he made sure Moses would never be eligible for parole, and I love it. I want to make it clear, Judge Curlewis said, according to the Cape Times, I mean that Moses Sithole should stay in jail for the rest of his life. This was also the day Sithole's daughter Bridget turned 3. Sithole, who listened to his sentence with no emotion, was taken to CMAX, the maximum security section of Pretoria Central Prison, and the highest security cell block in all of South Africa. Here he will live with 94 other prisoners, all of them considered to be the most dangerous in the country, including Mr. Prime Evil, Eugene de Kock, who got fucking let go. That still bothers me. Each prisoner was allowed 1 hour a day outside their cell, 3 visits per month. As of the summer of 2004, Sithole was still in CMAX prison in Pretoria, according to some articles. Reportedly taking a correspondence course in writing. That's good. So he could tell his life story in his own words. We haven't heard much more from him since, though, but he is still incarcerated. Is alive at the age of 60. Tragically, so unfairly, both his wife and daughter have died of complications related to AIDS. They could not afford the same antiviral medication this piece of shit gets for free from the state. Life really is such a bitch sometimes. Let's get out of this timeline.
Good job, soldier. You made it back. Barely.
Moses Sithole, another fucking loser. Murdered at least 37 women and a toddler. Police think it's possible he could have killed over 70 women. Who knows how many others he raped before he started killing women. We'll probably never know to what extent, if any, Moses worked with David Salipe, but it sure seems like they did some shit together. We do know Moses, a bad apple, pretty much from the beginning. He had a rough upbringing, like so many did, like millions and millions did in South Africa. Born in an impoverished place, designated for black South Africans during apartheid. When he's 6, his father died. His mom abandoned the family. After stints in some orphanages, Sithole will spend some time as a manual laborer, even bizarrely try to sell or actually sell his brother's house before he moved on to his first career as a serial rapist. He would assault several women, including his girlfriend and her younger teen sister, before he got himself landed in prison. He'd maintained that this was a false accusation, but his later actions would prove otherwise. Beginning in 1994, or perhaps earlier if we attribute David Salipe's crimes to him, Sithole targeted black women who were most often in their early to mid-20s. They were young, professional women, some already mothers, eager to move up in the world, or unemployed, wanting to get a job, obviously. When a charming young man told them he ran a charity, they were eager to talk to him, eager to see if life would finally cut them a break and give them a real opportunity for a better life. They had no way of knowing that his official-looking documents were typed up by a secretary at a trucking company where he washed trucks, and that he had already been in prison for rape, and he was going to kill them. Sithole would take them to remote fields where he would beat, rape, murder them. He would strangle them, generally with their underwear. Also once inflicted a head wound on the 2-year-old son of one of his victims and left the boy to likely die from exposure. Ever the self-aggrandizing piece of shit, in October of 95, Sithole contacted South African journalist Tamsin de Beer, identified himself as the hunted serial killer. Finally, thanks to his brother-in-law, authorities were able to set up a fake meeting by a Johannesburg factory where they apprehended Sithole, shooting him when he tried to fight his way out with a hatchet. Key in apprehending him would be the work of Mickey Pistorius, South Africa's first profiler, who figured out how Moses operated. Her work, the work of countless others, would all pay off in making sure that Moses Sithole never will see the light of day again. Sentenced to 50 years in prison for each of the 38 murders, 12 years imprisonment for each of the 40 rapes, 5 years imprisonment for each of the 6 robberies. Since his sentences run consecutively, the total effective sentence, 2,410 years. Most people thought he would die long before now, seeing as he has HIV, but he still seems to be alive and kicking, even though the disease, he likely acquired via rape and brought home to his wife and child killed them both. So really, his official victim count should be 40. Also, I don't know for sure if he has his own cell or if he has a cellmate. If he does have a cellmate, how often does that dude have to listen to this? Oh, jeez. Oh, buddy. Probably a lot, right? Like a couple times a day? Let's get to the takeaways.
Timesuck Top 5 Takeaways.
Number 1, Moses Sithole is a rapist, a serial killer, all-around dirtbag found guilty of committing 38 murders, although he may have killed many more. The vast majority of his victims were left in specific killing areas, fields where he had killed before, after they had been raped and strangled with articles of their own clothing. Number 2, South Africa has a complicated and fascinating history surrounding apartheid, the system by which the South African government categorized and segregated different races during the middle of the 20th century. The time period was marked by extreme brutality, persecution of other political parties, and racial tension. It would contribute at least partially to the rise of serial killers in South Africa in the 90s and 2000s. And number 3, it is unclear how much, or if at all, Sithole was working with accomplices, namely David Salipe. Several crimes thought to be committed by Sithole or Salipe would ultimately be transferred to the other, and both men had very similar MOs. Indeed, Sithole knew one of Salipe's victims, or perhaps it was the other way around. Thankfully, that ambiguity was not enough to get the case thrown out, and Sithole sentenced to 2,410 years in prison. Number 4, hail Mickey Pistorius. The South African publicist and journalist turned profiler would be an integral part of capturing Moses Sithole, as there were not any other profilers in South Africa at the time. With serial killer hunter legend Robert Ressler's help, she put together a profile of Moses that was spot on, including facts like he had been involved in fraud and deceived women with his charming personality. As a coda to her story, something we didn't mention in the timeline, Pistorius would go on to train over 100 detectives to investigate serial criminals. In 2000, she resigned from the police with the rank equivalent to senior superintendent, joined a private investigation company, also sought counseling when she realized she suffered from PTSD from everything she had seen. Since then, she has been involved in writing her memoirs, television production, has a YouTube channel, owns a private practice as a psychologist. A biopic series about her was released last year, Catch Me a Killer, an 11-part true crime television series produced by South Africa's Showmax network. If you know Game of Thrones, the one who plays Mickey Pistorius, Charlotte Hope, was Miranda, Ramsay Bolton's sadistic girlfriend. Also, so random, she is the aunt of one of South Africa's most infamous criminals, murderer Oscar Pistorius, a.k.a. the Blade Runner, the first amputee to win a non-disabled world track medal at the 2012 Summer Olympics. Pistorius, the first double-leg amputee participant. And number 5, new info. We talked a lot about people, good and bad, in this episode, from Nelson Mandela to Moses Sithole. What else is going on in South Africa? Well, wine. Fucking wine is huge. South Africa, famous for its wine. I'm not much of a wine drinker, but it's big. It's the 7th biggest producer of wine on the planet. South Africa has the longest wine route on Earth. Route 62 winds 850 kilometers, or 528 miles from Cape Town to Port Elizabeth. You got plenty of opportunities to stop off, sip the country's famous Chenin Blanc. South Africa also has the world's biggest land mammal, the African elephant, biggest non-crocodilian reptile, the leatherback sea turtle. South Africa's ostrich claims the prize for biggest bird on the planet. And if you book a safari, you might also see an eland, the world's biggest, slowest kind of antelope. And of course, South Africa, home to the fastest land mammal on Earth, the cheetah. Its national animal, though, is the springbok. You'll see the slender gazelle-like creature everywhere on your vacation if you go there, from postage stamps to the country's coat of arms, just to fucking bounce it around. Also the nickname for their national rugby team, affectionately known as the Boks. And having eaten springbok on several occasions many years ago in South Africa, not only adorable, fucking delicious.
Timesuck Top 5 Takeaways.
South Africa's Ted Bundy, Moses Sithole, has been sucked just like Ted. Right, he's prolific, handsome, charming, intelligent, a real Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Also seemed to attack a symbolic representation of the same woman he thought wronged him over and over again. Thank you to the Bad Magic Productions team for helping making Timesuck, such as Queen of Bad Magic, Lindsay Cummins, running operations around here. Art Warlock, Logan Keith, making sure the episode sounds good, designing merch for the store at badmagicproductions.com. Sophie Evans providing initial research. Thanks to the All Seeing Eyes moderating the Cult of the Curious private Facebook page, the Mod Squad making sure Discord keeps running smooth, and everybody over on the Timesuck subreddit and Bad Magic subreddit. And now let's head on over to this week's Timesucker updates.
Updates? Get your Timesucker updates.
First up, Super Sucker. Jordan James's grandparents are fucking insane. He sent in an email to bojangles@timesuckpodcast.com with the subject line to prove it. Two brothers with the same name try identical twins with the same name. Here's what he wrote. Dear Dan and the Timesuck team, my wife and I were listening to the episode on the Lindbergh baby while on vacation in Florida at my father's snowbird property. When you mentioned two of Lindbergh's backers being brothers with the same name, we looked at each other and had to laugh. My father is an identical twin. Not sure what my grandparents were thinking, or if they just like to challenge when they named them. This is fucking ridiculous. My father's name is William Donald Lynn James. His twin brother, identical twin brother, is named William Ronald Lynn James. Yes, you read that correctly. They both have four names, are identical twins, and have only a single letter's difference in all their names. Yeah, William Donald and William Ronald. Suffice to say, they've always gone by Donnie and Ronnie. Jesus Christ. They and I have lived in the same small town our whole lives. I cannot tell you how many times my dad and I have been out to eat. When somebody has come over, had an entire conversation with my dad, and then walked off, I'll ask him who that was, and he'll reply with, hell if I know. They must have thought I was Ronnie. I've also heard many a tale of their youth as identical twins, doing shit like swapping places for tests on different subjects in school based on who was best at what, as well as the occasional girlfriend swap. Oh my God. Anyway, I thought you'd enjoy this based on your exclamation of disbelief on two siblings having the same first name. I'm actually sorry for the length of this one. Thanks for all you do. Jordan Lynn James. Only got 3 names. P.S. If you read this on the show, please wish my beautiful wife a happy 9th wedding anniversary for October 1st. We've been together for 15 years, and I realize how lucky I am anew every day. That is adorable. Man, you're getting some fucking points. She is the most amazing woman and my best friend, Jordan. Well, Jordan, you're a sweetie. So is your wife. What a sweet shout out for your wife. That's adorable. You're a lucky guy. And I know because I am too. Your wife is also my best friend. No, my wife is also my best friend and an amazing woman. And that is wild about your dad and uncle. Why did your grandparents do that? Have you ever asked them directly, like, why would you do that? Did they have a fucked up sense of humor? Like, why would you name two identical twins William James? Then give them each the same middle name and then a second middle name that differs by one fucking letter, Ronald and Donald. I truly want to know what the hell they were thinking and if they ended up regretting that. Very funny, though. Thanks for listening. Thanks for sharing. Now, well-spoken sucker Ed Strode sent in a message that cracked me up. Its subject line, what the fuck did he just call it? And he wrote, Suckmaster, there have been a few, how did he pronounce it? Moments over the years that I've had to shake my head at. And even one or two I've been on the cusp of writing into correct. But during the Action Park Suck, you casually threw out that Gene Mulvihill attended Lehigh University. Maybe he was a coxman and got laid a lot at college, but he attended Lehigh University. Thanks for all the laughs, both intended and accidental. Give Bojangles a scratch behind the ears for all of us. And as always, keep on sucking. Space Lizard Ed Strode. P.S. It's the Potomac River. Jeez. Thank you, Ed. Fucking words, right? For this South African episode, I had to have watched, no exaggeration, at least 150 YouTube videos to find out how people's names and towns' names were being said. Fucking Dutch, man. My God. I think I was thinking of actress Jennifer Jason Leigh. Or Jennifer Jason Leigh? Now I can't even remember. How do you say her name? Oh, no. I knew it before I sat down here. Jennifer Jason Leigh, I think. Oh, God. I don't know. Now I'm panicking. Her name's spelled Leigh, though. One letter off of Lehigh. I didn't see that first H. My brain zipped right on past it. I don't know what I'm doing when it comes to fucking names of places. I probably never will. Thanks for sending in a message. With not just a correction, but a subject line that cracked me up. And finally, Sad Sucker, Kevin Winnick, and many others sent a very similar email to his. He had a subject line of, you did Whipple dirty. And he wrote, hey, fuckface. I love emails that start that way. Hey, fuckface. How the fuck did you not think to make an Action Park ad sponsored by Whipple? It's a match made in heaven. You still have time to fix it. Okay? Love you. Bye. Kevin Winnick. Yeah, thank you, Kevin and others. I had it written in my notes, add a Whipple commercial, in that episode. But then I wrote all those Action Park parody commercials, and I felt like it was just too much of the same type of thing. That would be redundant, but you know what? I should have done it. Too late now. But I can do it in this episode. The Action Park episode should have definitely been brought to you by Whipple! Dan Cummins fucked it! Thoughts of his candy ass sliding off the Alpine slide scared him. How did he not know that all you have to do to never die at Action Park is have enough Whipple Action Park Edition in your system? With Whipple Action Park Edition, you don't slide, you levitate. You don't swim, you hover. You don't die, you fucking fly. Every 64-ounce can of Whipple Action Park Edition is packed with 20 grams of trailer park meth to keep your motor revving, a 2-week supply of Oxycontin to keep the pain away, 3 ounces of a blood clotter to keep you from bleeding out, a dozen tabs of acid to keep you from understanding how dangerous every single fucking ride is, and a bunch of fruit punch mixed with Everclear for flavor and fearlessness. It's time to put the action back in our parks. Bring your own giant hamster ball, pound a Whipple, roll down whatever fucking hill you want. America! Bring your own cannon, shoot your own tennis balls, or baseballs, or rocks, and whatever little bitch-ass pansy looks scared. That'll teach them to show fear. That'll teach them to not drink Whipple Action Park Edition. Fuck you. Fuck your family. Drink Whipple Action Park Edition, now available in grape, grave, pool, and cherry class action raspberry flavors. Whipple is a proud subsidiary of Bear Evil Incorporated. Thanks, everybody. That was fun.
Next time, suckers. I needed that.
We all did.
Well, thank you for listening to another Bad Magic Productions podcast. Be sure and rate and review Timesuck if you haven't already. Check out Nightmare Fuel. Do it! Please and thank you. Don't start raping people that you've given job offers to this week. Just give them a job or shut the fuck up. Don't touch them. Don't rape. Do keep on sucking.
Bad Magic Productions.
Hey, serious question now. Is this creepy?
Oh.
Or is it sexy? Like, should I have not played that? I don't know. To me, it sounds sad. Somebody who would probably just like to have sex, but is jerking it instead. But also, I don't feel sad when I jerk it. But I think if I recorded myself jerking it like this, listen to the audio, I would be sad. Why is that? I'm also, not turning on my dick. So maybe if you like dick, is that fun to hear? What do you think? You turned on? Turned off? Is it hot? Sad? Funny? Infuriating? Is it embarrassing if you can't make it to your phone or computer very easy right now to turn off this episode? And you don't want to have to explain to other people why you've been listening to somebody jerk off? I don't know. How long does this guy jerk off? This guy jerks off for almost 10 minutes. 9 minutes, 59 seconds, if you're curious. Is that how long it takes? Is that how long it takes you to jerk off? Why am I still talking? Why am I still playing this? Why are you still listening to this? That's probably the most important question I have right now. Oh, fuck is right.